Hi everyone, it's Natasha here from the Nextwork team, and today we are going live with deploying a web app with CodeDeploy. Welcome to Project 5 of the 7-Day DevOps Challenge. We're going to learn how to set up and use AWS CodeDeploy in this project so that we can finally bring our web app to the real world and deploy it on an EC2 instance. So this project, again, is following on 4 projects that we've done so far in the 7-Day DevOps Challenge. Now, if this is your first project in the 7-Day DevOps Challenge, I do highly recommend that you check out projects 1 to 4 first before coming along and doing project 5, because today's difficulty level is pretty spicy, okay? I am really excited to be doing this, and I do know that the pacing is going to be a little bit faster because we have done a bit of setup already before. Okay, now, here's our little summary. Welcome to day 5, and with CodeDeploy, we are really putting together all of the hard work that we've kind of set up in projects 1 to 4. Because in projects 1 to 4, what do? We used VS Code and GitHub to write and store your web app's code. We used CodeArtifact to secure your web app's packages. We used CodeBuild to compile and package your app into this handy file for deployment. So we've done quite a few cool things already with our CI/CD pipeline so far, and we still have CodeDeploy to do, plus 2 more, which are CloudFormation and Code Pipeline for the rest of the series. But yeah, CodeDeploy, again, another huge milestone. Okay, CodeBuild was a big one, I would say, but CodeDeploy, man, it's a big one, all right? So if you were to look at our diagram today, look at how much is getting filled up now. This is what we're focusing on in CodeDeploy. Okay, so in this project, we're going to be setting up CodeDeploy, which is a service that helps you deploy your web app. And then, how are we going to deploy that web app? Where is that deployed web app going to live? It has to live in another EC2 instance. So we're going to be setting up an EC2 instance that is going to be deploying that web app. Now, deployment instances usually have a lot of networking settings. Okay, you usually have to give it a few custom networking settings to make sure that it can actually serve public traffic. So what that means is, in order for us to create that development instance, we actually have a few networking resources to deploy. It gets a little bit intense if we were to do all of that from scratch. So today we're actually going to be using another cool service called CloudFormation to help us with automating the deployment of an EC2 instance and all of the networking resources that it needs. So yep, today is a bit of like a double whammy, because we got CodeDeploy, our star service here, but we're also going to be getting to know CloudFormation, who is going to help us with deploying our deployment instance. By the end of this project, we're going to be seeing a live website. So I'm super excited about that milestone. All of the work that you've been doing, putting together your web app code, is going to become live, and we can even share each other's links so that we can be like, oh, check out my website, and I can check out yours. It's going to be pretty fun. Okay, now, if you're completely new to this series and you're like, what is going on at the front of this diagram and how does that link with what we're doing today? Here's a quick little recap. So across projects 1 to 4 of the 7-Day DevOps Challenge, we were setting up kind of like the base of our CI/CD pipeline here. So we have a development environment, which is an EC2 instance where we are writing our web app's code. And then here we have a key pair, which means it's like a security thing that lets us access our EC2 instance. But more importantly are these services in the middle here. So in project 2, we use GitHub to store our web app's code so that our web app's code always has a very, very handy cloud storage space so that if you make any changes, GitHub will be there to track any changes. And even if you were to delete your development environment, that code at least is still living somewhere, so you can always retrieve it and reuse it again. Then we've got CodeArtifact. CodeArtifact was in project 3 of this series. And in CodeArtifact, what were we doing? If this is not your first project in this challenge, I hope you remember that CodeArtifact is all about securing your web app's packages and dependencies. So what that means for us is your web app is actually made up of a lot of packages. So it calls a lot of code that's already been written by someone else, and it's just put on the internet. So this CodeArtifact repository is all about storing backups of those dependencies and packages that your web app uses. And once you have your web app code, your development environment, you've got GitHub and CodeArtifact set up, you kind of have the ingredients for a web app all together now. You know, your code is living somewhere safe. There's also somewhere to store all of the dependencies and packages. So in this kind of next era of our CI/CD pipeline, it kind of starts here, okay, CodeBuild onwards. This is now about making that web app. Now that you've put together the ingredients, it's now about like baking whatever you've put together and then serving it to someone. So in CodeBuild, we're kind of like baking like this web app code that we've created so it becomes one handy package. That was the entire purpose of creating CodeBuild, to compile the code and to create this file called a WAR file out of it. And then we stored that file in S3. So by the end of the project yesterday, or day 4 of this challenge, our S3 bucket had a build artifact inside. So now CodeDeploy is, we're kind of like going full circle in this explanation now, but CodeDeploy is gonna start by actually retrieving that package that CodeBuild left here. And CodeDeploy is going to say, oh, thank you so much for compiling the code for me. You've already put it in a WAR file for me. So now all CodeDeploy has to do is grab the file and deploy it onto an EC2 instance so that you have a live website. So yeah, this is kind of like the application kind of journey from just creating an instance to writing the code, storing the code, building the code, and now deploying your web app so that it's live somewhere. Okay, so that's kind of the journey we're going to go on today. So we're going to be launching the deployment environment with CloudFormation. We're going to write some deployment scripts. I know I didn't mention it, oh my goodness. But there's going to be a few scripts that we have to write that's a part of the deployment process. And deployment scripts basically helps with the whole automation of deployment, and you're going to see that soon. Then of course we have the actual deploying of the web app after you set up CodeDeploy and after you write those scripts. So this final point is all about seeing your web app live on the internet. Okay, so as you might have guessed, maybe this is something you might have picked up on, but we called CodeBuild a continuous integration service, which means it helps with really making sure that whenever you make changes to your code, CodeBuild will automatically compile that code and turn that into that WAR file that we'll be using to deploy. And then now, in a very similar fashion, you've got CodeDeploy, which is a continuous deployment service. So CodeDeploy actually automates the deployment of changes to the build artifact. So you know how CodeBuild will detect changes in your code? CodeDeploy will detect changes in the build artifact. And the moment it senses a change in the build artifact, CodeDeploy is capable of just automatically deploying that new file so that users automatically see the new things that CodeBuild has compiled for us. And that's why CodeDeploy is also called a continuous deployment service. Okay, so I hope we're all excited. This is what we're going to be building by the end of our 7-day DevOps challenge. After CodeDeploy, today's part, we have Code Pipeline that really brings together our entire pipeline together, but there's also a special project on CloudFormation that's about the actual automation of this entire thing that we've created today. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be huge. Awesome. Wow, a big hello to everyone that's in the chat also. It's great to be doing another project in the 7-day DevOps challenge with you, and I hope you're enjoying the challenge so far. Big shout out to H. Oh my gosh, 5 for 5. H, this is awesome. Thanks so much for being here. We also got Sachin, 5 for 5 again, back again, starting from the top. How did you go with the error yesterday? Let us know. Thanks so much, Amber, for being here. Amber says, woohoo, day 5. And we got Maya saying, woohoo, let's do this. Thank you, I'm so hyped. We got Mario saying hello. We've got Tim Timo AI Studio back again, 5 for 5 as well, I swear. This is amazing. Let's go. Oh, how are you going? Did you get to try Project 4 of the series? I know you said you really wanted to do it in yesterday's live. And we got Praneeth here. How are you doing? It must be very late at night for you right now, so good to see you here. Wow, it's a party here today. Thanks everyone for being here, and let's get started. All right, so we have just talked a lot about the process of deployment and CodeDeploy, so you can always read this if you like a bit more of a text reminder. So I've written all that I've explained today in here as well. But if you're new to the concept of deployment, please make sure that you get to learn what deployment means first before we go into that project. And in short, deployment is basically the process of taking the code from, okay, it's written up and it's like working in my computer, to actually putting it in a live environment so it's working in all of your users' computers or all of your users' devices. It's really about making that code public, so it's actually working for the end users that you're creating this app for. All right. All right. So in this project, we will demonstrate how to use CodeDeploy to deploy a web app. We're doing this project to learn about how deployment works and how it can be automated using a combination of CodeDeploy and deployment scripts. By the end of this project, we'll see a live website. Whoa! Very nice. Okay, now to get us started, let's just check. Have you completed days 1 to 4 of the 7-Day DevOps Challenge? You know, the 7-Day DevOps Challenge would have introduced you to some of the services that you saw earlier in our architecture diagram. And please make sure that you just pick the right option for you. You know, either yes, and you've deleted your resources, which is what we recommend. So you could be in the first tab like me, or you're saying, yeah, and I kept all my resources. Well, if that's the case, you can jump straight to step 4, because you get to skip all of the setup steps. Although I personally recommend retrying the setup steps and challenging yourself to see how much you can do without guidance. And that's when you can really be confident about the work that you're doing and really own it, that you're like, oh, yeah, I definitely know what's going on, when you try to do the same thing but without guidance. So if you haven't tried any of these projects yet, that's okay. We still have the steps ready for you. You're just going to have to be ready for a bit more setup time across steps 1 to 3 of this project, because you might have more things to install, more things to learn about. All right, but for us, we've deleted our resources even though we've done the first 4 projects. But since we have a bit of that experience now, this demo is going to assume that you are going to do this project with an existing IAM admin user, so we don't need to set one up from scratch. This project will assume that you have VS Code, and in VS Code you have an SSH extension in there installed. This demo is also going to assume that you have a GitHub repository already that's storing the code you've created across days 1 to 4 of this challenge. All right, so if all 3 is a yes for you, I would highly recommend just following along with today's guide. Otherwise, if you're belonging into one of these 2 groups, I would highly recommend either checking out the live project demos for previous days in this series, or skipping ahead to where I went when I start step 4 in this project demo. All right, see you in step 1 for everyone that's with me. Cool. How is the project guide working okay for everyone? I'm going to chuck it in the chat as well. I'm going to just chuck that in the chat too, so you can all get access to it. Really big apologies that first image isn't loading properly, which is why I opened it in a new tab as well. But you might notice that first image isn't working quite right. So you can always take a screenshot of this if you'd like for reference now. Or I promise that image will definitely be loading very, very soon. It's just taking its sweet time. It's probably having some coffee before it decides to join us live. But that's okay. We'll keep on going ahead by setting up our development instance. Okay, round 5 for everyone who's been doing this entire challenge from day 1. You should be very, very familiar by now how to launch an EC2 instance, how to SSH connect to that instance, install the tools you need, and clone the web app code from GitHub. So all of these steps that we're about to do is about the setup of our development environment, which is where we write the code. Okay, and again, if you haven't done projects 1 to 4 yet, it's okay, we've got more detailed guidance in that first tab. Otherwise, everyone else, let's follow along in these other 4 tabs to tick off these milestones, okay? And of course, I really, really invite you to challenge yourself to pause this demo or just mute me and try to do the setup by yourself if you've done these projects before, because it's a great challenge to have. Okay, cool beans. So we're gonna start by launching that EC2 instance now. And don't forget to log into AWS as your IAM admin user, and we're gonna go straight into the EC2 console. So let's type in EC2 here, and let's dive into EC2. Okay. Okay, so in EC2, you can click on Instances and start launching an instance. I just realized I could totally move this here so that you can see the steps on. You can see the steps as well as what I'm doing on my main working screen, like my AWS screen. Okay. All right, and we're just going to go ahead and launch an EC2 instance now with the following details. Oh, and before I forget, don't forget to pick the correct region for yourself. We have a list of 13 regions that we highly recommend you do this project in. That list of 13 regions is actually right here. If you're like, wait, what 13? Okay, here you go. So we highly recommend doing your project in one of these 13 regions because these are the regions that actually have all of the services we'll be using in the entire series. So if you were to do this project in another region, there's a chance that you might get stuck halfway through this project because you might not be able to see a service. It might be unavailable in the region that you're working on. So I'm going to be working using the Oregon region, which is like the classic region in AWS because it has pretty much every single AWS service available. But you are so welcome to just refer to that list and pick the one that works best for you if you have a preference. Okay, so you've got your region ready, and let's go ahead and set up our instance. So the name should be Nextwork DevOps your name, so put in your name here. And then we're going to just make sure that our Amazon machine image is free tier eligible. It should be Amazon Linux 2023. Okay. And your instance type should say t2.micro, which is also free tier eligible, so you don't get charged. All right, now we've got up to our key pair. So you can create a new key pair, and you can name it Nextworks -DevOps. I can see that I have a cheeky little key pair here, which I set up right before this. So I'm gonna quickly delete that one. I always make this mistake. If this is not your first live, you will see that I always make the silly mistake of forgetting to delete the key pair before the live. And I'm like, oh, sorry guys. And I just make the same mistake again tomorrow. I hope not tomorrow though. Tomorrow, keep me accountable. But let me refresh the page. And let me just make sure that the existing key pair that I had set up before this project is deleted now, so I can start from scratch with you guys. Free tier eligible for AMI and the instance type. And now for the key pair, let's create a new one. That's called Nextwork DevOps. All right, and everything we could keep those default settings there. And we download a private key from that one. Very nice. So that private key is going to help us with getting access to our EC2 instance. And before we finish our setup, we're pretty much done. We just need to make sure that we're allowing SSH traffic just from our IP address. Okay, so make sure you're selecting my IP, and this is just great for network security. You don't want anyone to be able to go and find your EC2 instance. You want your EC2 instance to almost have like self-defense skills and be able to say, no, like, don't connect to me. Only this certain IP address, which is your IP address, is allowed to connect to me. Now, if you are reusing an instance that you have created from a previous project, please just make sure that your EC2 instance that you've created before, the my IP that it's set to is still your current IP, because your IP can change, honestly, so frequently. that I've had this mistake before and it got me stuck for hours before I realized it was actually just because my IP address changed and that was why I couldn't connect to my EC2 instance. All right, so let's keep on going and launch our instance now. Woo, amazing, Sachin, doing everything from the beginning. What a legend. I'm in the presence of legends today. Tintimo AI Studio, you're doing everything from the beginning, starting over again as well? That's amazing. That's amazing. I can't wait to see what starting over is like for you, for the both of you, because I have a feeling you both have so much experience in this now that it might be like, oh, like you get it a lot more than maybe the first time round. So excited for you. All right, EC2 instance launched. First milestone ticked off, and we can now move on to that next milestone, which is about connecting to the instance. To connect to that instance, we got a bit of setup to do, okay? So our setup is to just make sure that the private key we downloaded is in a neat little folder and that we have access to use it. So open up your desktop and create a new folder here, and we'll just call it DevOps, like this. Then in that new folder, we're gonna store that private key you just downloaded when you created your key pair. So now you should have a folder that says DevOps with nextwork-devops.pen, your private key, inside. Okay, this is just for great organization because it's gonna make finding this key pair, this private key, a lot easier in this step here. Okay, because now we're gonna open up VS Code that you've installed, and we're gonna use that SSH extension to try and connect to your EC2 instance. So you've got your VS Code open up here, and then we've got that cheeky little remote SSH extension on the side here. I might just zoom in for us. So you got this remote SSH extension. Let's click on it. And do you know what's next? I have a feeling if this is your fifth time doing it with us, I have a feeling you might even start to know these commands and these steps off by heart, which is going to be an amazing milestone. But you can try to connect to your host, and you're going to notice that you might have an existing host in there. All you got to do is click on Configure SSH Host because we don't need that previous setting anymore. And let's click on your configuration file. Okay, so this is the old configuration file that was set up when you connected to your EC2 instance yesterday or whenever you did that previous project. So all you got to do is once you have this file open, delete the EC2 instance that was launched for last time. Okay, that EC2 instance is probably deleted now unless you're a little cheeky and you decided to keep your resources. If it's the same EC2 instance, then you're definitely welcome to keep it. But for myself, I'm launching a new one. So let's go ahead and grab the address of the EC2 instance we just deployed. We just launched. Oh, here we go. So once you're in the instances page, you can check the EC2 instance you just launched. So I've checked it here, and you can expand this little window to see its address. Okay, so now we've got an address. Why do we need that address? We need this address so that your local computer knows where your EC2 instance lives. So let's click on that. Oh, just realized I might be a little, I hope you can see me okay. But let's click on this and let's paste that inside the configuration file so that your configuration file is storing the correct address to the new EC2 instance that you're using. To everyone that might be wondering, how did I just paste in 2 locations at once? With VS Code, you can hold down the Option key on your keyboard, hold down the Option key, and then select the second location, and that's like 2 places highlighted. So when you press paste, you can have the location just pasted in two places at once. All right. So once you've saved that, you can save your configuration file and go ahead and connect to your EC2 instance. Okay. I'm about to run into an error, I think. Can anyone tell me what that error is going to be? I did run into the error. I'm glad I did, because I would actually be spooked if I didn't get this error. I ran into the same error yesterday. So if you're watching this for the second time, can you remember what the error is? All right. I wonder who's gonna remember. And I'm gonna make a quick note. All right, so the error I'm running into is because of it's a permissions error today. It says permission denied. Okay, it's permission denied for me because my private key is not letting me use it at the moment. We've got this private key stored in our DevOps folder over here. But right now, this private key is not letting us use it. So we need to actually give ourselves the permission to use this private key, and then we'll be able to connect to our EC2 instance using it. So do you remember how you can give yourself the permission? When you're back in your VS Code window, open up a new terminal team, and let's navigate our terminal. Okay, you can run print working directory, pwd, or dir if you're using Windows, and then navigate your terminal into your DevOps folder. So on Linux, H, I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for the update. Hopefully we can catch up tomorrow. All the best. And then navigate your terminal into the DevOps folder. Okay. And then you're going to have to run the command chmod 400 for Windows, and give yourself the permission to use that private key. All right, so that should be all good now. And let me try closing this connection and reconnecting, and it should work. Okay, and these are the Windows commands that are also available in the project guide. So do check out this part of the project guide if you're running into the same error and you're thinking, oh my gosh, what are the Windows commands to do the same thing? Okay, and congrats team, we've successfully connected via SSH to our instance now. So what's next is for us to install the tools that our instance needs. This milestone is checked off. Next up, we got 3 tools to install. We got Maven, Java, and Git. So let's go ahead and open up a new terminal. And this time, because we are SSH connected, that means all the commands we run here are going to be affecting the EC2 instance that we've launched. So when we run the commands to install Maven, to install Java, to install Git, we're installing those tools into the EC2 instance, not your local computer. So let's run that first command now to install Maven. And you're gonna see that it just works right away. You know, the terminal is telling you all these messages and updates about installing Maven. Now, next up is to install Java. So let's install Java here. And Java is the programming language that we're using to develop our web app, which is why it's so important. And in the meantime, Maven is all about being kind of like the project manager for us within this EC2 instance. It's responsible for compiling the web app. It's responsible for making sure the packages that you need are inside your environment. It's responsible for also packaging the web app into that small file so that later on, you know, when CodeDeploy is ready to deploy a web app, CodeDeploy has that file to use. So Maven is actually just an absolute G in this project. And yeah, I can't imagine how much more work we need to do if there wasn't Maven to do all these like operations for us. So shout out to Maven, and let's install Git last. Okay, so let's install Git. And once you've installed Git, that's all of the tools you need done. Okay, so you've installed Maven, Java, Git. And what's the point of installing them? 1, to build your web app so that you can run your web app code. And 2, we're installing Git because we want to retrieve the code that we've created in the previous projects of this series. So let us go ahead and retrieve our web apps code. In the meantime, we've got Tintimo AI Studio asking a great question here. Is Maven like Node.js? And I actually think this might be a great question to ask our project guide. I feel like this is a great time to demo this. So let me ask, actually. Maybe we can highlight something like this and say, is Maven like Node.js? I don't know. Do you think it's going to work, team? Of course. So Maven is a build automation tool for Java projects, while Node.js is a JavaScript runtime environment, so they're actually quite different, Tintimo AI Studio. So Maven is kind of like a helper for your project, and on the other hand, Node.js is an entire runtime environment, so Node.js has its own package manager called npm, whereas Maven is the package manager for your Java web app. Okay, so very good to know that they're both used for managing dependencies and building projects, but they are designed for different programming languages and have different functionalities. Maven is specifically for Java projects, Node.js for JavaScript projects. But I think you could be right there that at least they have a similar kind of purpose there. They're designed for managing dependencies, they're designed for building projects, but it seems like their difference really does lie in the programming language, which I completely agree with. And it seems like in this case, it's also about running JavaScript code outside of a web browser, which is pretty interesting to me. Okay. And yep, to Jyotish, that's mentioning that you got stuck with the build spec file. We are repeating the steps today, so let us know what errors you run into when you are getting stuck with build spec. Exciting. Let's go for it. Okay, and let's move on to the web app code, because we're now going to clone the code that we've created from the previous projects. I love this feeling of being able to just say, that work that I did for the previous project is helping me out today. It just feels very handy. And it makes me feel like these projects are even more connected because you get to use the code, reuse code that you've written before. And for our case, I should actually open it here, I realized. And in our case, we have a repository, and it is called the Nextwork Web Project. So open up your repository now, because we're going to go ahead and clone the code. Let's double check that we have all the code from all of the previous projects. You've got build spec, you've got pom.xml, you've got settings.xml. These are the most important ones to double check that you have. And then once you click here, you're going to notice that your index.jsp file, which defines kind of like the look of your web app, is also still inside as well. Very, very good. Yeah, what's most important for us is that build spec. I think this one's going to be the most important one, plus settings.xml. All right, so let's clone the code over here by copying the HTTPS URL and running a git command that lets us copy the code that's inside that repository. So git clone, paste that URL, and that was all done. Okay, that was super, super quick, wasn't it? Once it's cloned, all you got to do is open up your file explorer here. And then you can click open folder and open up the folder that you just cloned. I'm actually so impressed. Git is working fast today. My goodness. It's so insane to me. Like, it kind of blows my mind that we ran a single line command, and just like that, we've downloaded all of the files we've put inside this repository. It's so cool. It's so, so cool and so, so convenient. So big shout out to GitHub for that. And yes, we do trust the authors of the files in this folder. I believe that, because it's us. We are the authors of these files. We better trust ourselves, team. So now that we have access to our web app files in the EC2 instance, we are ready for the next step, for the next part of this setup. Okay, and the next part of the setup is about CodeArtifact. Yeah, CodeArtifact. What are you guys thinking? Do you remember CodeArtifact? Do you remember what it does and how it works and how it connects with your web app? If you're wanting a little bit of a refresher, CodeArtifact is our artifacts repository. GitHub is storing all of the code, the web app code that we write ourselves, and CodeArtifact is pretty much storing all of the packages and dependencies that we don't write ourselves, but we use as a part of our web app. So the reason why CodeArtifact is so important for us is for two reasons. One is efficiency and one is security. Efficiency, the moment CodeArtifact is storing our packages and our dependencies, the next time we build our web app, it's going to be so much faster because CodeArtifact is like a local repository that lives very, very close to your web app. You can think of it that way. It's a lot faster for Maven to retrieve packages when the repository is local. The second thing is security. No longer does Maven need to always go to the internet or install packages from places where maybe that traffic could be intercepted because you're going to the internet to download these packages and dependencies. So now having your own private local repository is so much more secure. Okay, so here are the milestones for CodeArtifact and setting up CodeArtifact. You've got creating the artifact repository, you've got setting up the IAM policy and role, and then you need to give your development EC2 instance the access to CodeArtifact before we complete our connection settings. So if I were to just even boil that down into two, we need to create CodeArtifact and then connect CodeArtifact with Maven. That's it. That's truly it. So I'm just going to quickly check the chat. It sounds like we've got a few questions and a few activity here, which is awesome. Thanks so much. And always ask questions. Keep asking questions. They're amazing. Okay, I see now. Still the same error. I did create my settings.xml file in the project directory, but I'm missing something. Ooh. I have a feeling. We'll look into this together in a second. But Sachin, is your settings.xml file, is everything also within the settings tags? I'm curious. Okay, and if it's still not resolved, definitely feel free to chuck the link to your post in the community and we can open up any of the updates that you've written since yesterday. And yeah, shout out to Tintimo AI Studio for mentioning that CodeArtifact is about security, like securing your packages. Great advice there too about checking your CloudWatch logs to find the errors. So for Sachin, if you were to switch tabs back to your build errors tab, there might be a link for you to open up your CloudWatch logs and see exactly what went wrong there. Okay. So let's move on to opening up CodeArtifact and then creating the repository. This is going to be our third time round doing our CodeArtifact repository. So I'm going to be speeding through this step a little bit quicker, and then I will still go through CodeBuild, the next step after this, in a little bit more detail because I can see that a few of us are a little bit stuck in that step. So with CodeArtifact, let's create that repository right away, and let's select the repositories tab and create the repository. Okay, I think I've probably zoomed in now. That's great. Okay, so for CodeArtifact, let's set up our repository, and the name is going to be simple, Nextwork-DevOps-CI/CD, and let's enter a description. Repository for Nextwork CI/CD artifacts. And then we have our public upstream repository, which is Maven Central Store. Let's head next. Select yourself for your domain, enter Nextwork, that's the name of your domain, and select next again before you have a look at your package flow. All right, amazing work. So you've got your repository here, Nextwork DevOps CI/CD, and there's a whole package flow that tells you that if your local repository doesn't have any of the packages that are inside, then Maven can go upstream and visit a public repository like Maven Central to get the package it needs, and eventually store the copy of that thing that it had to grab inside the local repository. Long story short, Maven's always going to go to your local repository first to find packages now, which is awesome, and it's only going to have to go outside to external connections if it can't find what it needs here. Cool. So let's create the repository now. and you should see that it's a successful connection. Do you know what's next? What's next after you create your repository? I would love to know if you can have a sense of that flow in your head now, so that once you've done this step, what's the next thing that you do? You know, give yourself a little bit of a challenge and have a think, you know, what's the next step? And hi to Eagle in the meantime. Nice to have you here. Cool. So the next step is for us to actually figure out how to connect CodeArtifact with Maven. So we're going to pick Mac and Linux for the operating system, Maven as our package manager, and we can see that these are the connection instructions that can connect Maven with our CodeArtifact repository. Okay, for context, we're now in project 3 of our CI/CD pipeline, or sorry, project 3 of our 7-day DevOps challenge. So if I'm going a bit too quickly, just know that the step-by-step guidance is inside project 3. I highly recommend checking it out and following the demo there. Cool beans. So seems like we've got some instructions for connecting CodeArtifact with Maven. Shall we just try running that first command and see where things go? Now, in order to connect things, it says, okay, just run this command to get a token that lets your local Maven, basically that lets Maven get access to your CodeArtifact repository. So we're gonna go ahead and open up our terminal so that we can run that command. We're like, all right, we'll take you up for that. You're telling me I just need to run a command and I'm gonna get access to CodeArtifact? Say less. Let me run that command and let's see what happens. Darn, okay. We've seen this error before, so don't be alarmed. We got this. Right now, it's saying that we can't run this command because we actually still need permissions to CodeArtifact. In order to solve this error, you have to give your EC2 instance the permissions to access CodeArtifact and retrieve a token. All right, so what is actually happening in the background, if we were to really break down this command, is we're trying to save a password to a CodeArtifact repository. And the command to get a password to the CodeArtifact repository is in here. Do you see that little like back tick, you know, that tick? Oh, I should go this way so it's obvious, but that back tick here. So we got that back tick here, and then inside here is a command. And this command says, hey AWS, give me a password, give me a token that gives me access to this specific Nextwork domain inside CodeArtifact. And then once we have the password, can we save it inside this variable called token? Let's save it here so that later Maven can use it to visit CodeArtifact and get all of the packages that it needs. So that's the entire command. But right now, we're saying that you don't actually have credentials or you don't have the ability to access CodeArtifact. The best case, or sorry, the best practice way of giving our EC2 instance permission is not to directly hard code any credentials. If you have an EC2 instance, it means you can give it a role. And a role is like a crown that your EC2 instance can wear. And that crown will represent like a set of privileges or a set of access that your EC2 instance has. So let's create that crown. We're gonna go by creating the policy first. And that IAM policy is gonna say whoever, you know, has access to this policy is gonna have access to CodeArtifact. It's kind of what we're gonna say here in this policy. All right, so we're gonna create that policy now using JSON, paste that here, and create that policy just like that, okay? Given that this is the third time we're running these steps, I know I'm like flying through it a little bit quickly, but that's so that we have more time to spend on the more challenging parts of this project. So again, a small little reminder that we do have step-by-step guidance and detailed explanations inside day 3 of this series, okay? And once that policy is set up, you can create the role, which is like creating the crown. So this crown, who are we creating it for? An EC2 instance. So select EC2 as your use case, and then create a role that has the permission we just set up. Okay, and then this is the policy that we created. So we're now creating that crown, and that crown says whoever wears this crown will now have access to CodeArtifact. And that was the policy we just set up. So let's select next. And in our role name, let's enter EC2 instance Network CI/CD, give it a description, and create that role. Oops. Okay. So the role is created. The crown is in the world. It's in your AWS environment. So what's next for yourself is to give that crown to your EC2 instance. You're going to put that crown on your little EC2 instance's head, and you're going to say, all right, EC2 instance, you now have access to CodeArtifact. So we're going to select your EC2 instance inside that console, select actions, select security, modify the IAM role so it now has access to CodeArtifact, and make sure that the role you select is exactly the same name as what you've just created previously. Okay, it says role EC2 instance Network CI/CD was created. So we're going to make sure that the role that we select here has exact same name. Let's update our IAM role, and here we go. Now our EC2 instance has access. So if we were to run this command again, the command runs successfully. You can even tell that it's successful because it no longer has that terminal output that says, hey, like unable to locate credentials. So this is a success for us. Very good. Now that we have an EC2 instance with access to CodeArtifact, we can go ahead and finish our connection instructions. So to finish our connection instructions, you would usually have to create a new file called settings.xml. And inside settings.xml, you're going to have to fill it in with all of the code that you see from steps 4, 5, and 6. The cool thing is though, because we have just retrieved all of our code from our GitHub repository, we've done settings.xml before, we've saved it somewhere safe, and here it is already set up for us. So our settings.xml file is already created, and we don't need to do anything else. The only thing I would really encourage you to check is whether or not the names are different. Because if you've created a new repository with a different name, the name of these things inside your settings.xml file is going to be different. So for me, it's the same. It's always network-devops-CI/CD because the name of my repository when I first created this file is also the same name as my repository today, the one I just created. If your repository name changed, if your domain name changed, if those two details, any of that has changed, double check that all of these details are reflecting your current repository. Okay, otherwise you're going to run into some issues there. All right. So settings.xml is ticked off for us. And that means we can go straight into building the project. Okay. And I can see that we've got a bit of a chat going on here. Oh, Eagle! Yo, you're from Germany? That's awesome, man. I'm wondering, is this your first project in this series or in this challenge? Or have you done most of this challenge already? This is so cool. Thanks so much for taking the time. Tintamel AI Studio, you are so on point. I'm really impressed with how quickly you can follow along. I know I'm going through things at a faster pace today, but you are on point. Really, really cool. Very nice. Yeah, and I see that Jyotish has this error. Do you see the same error when you run this command locally in your EC2 instance terminal? Or do you only see this error inside your build spec file when you build the project? Because if you see this error locally as well, there's probably an error in some of your settings.xml file. But if you see that this error only exists when you build the project, the error might actually come from somewhere else. It might actually come from the build spec file being misconfigured, or actually it might come from somewhere else in the build spec file. So I thought I'd mention this, Jyotish. Run the same command locally. Let us know what you see. Okay. Cool beans. So shall we compile our project now? So compiling the project is basically this process of making your code machine friendly so that machines can run the code later on. Compiling is an extremely important step so that what you write, technically a computer can't just read this. You know, they can't just say like, oh yeah, I get it, I know what you want. You actually still need to translate it into computer language. And that's what Maven is doing when it compiles the code. And I can see that I have a bit of a build failure today. Oh, okay, I have an unauthorized error. It says Maven resources. Oh, that's amazing. I'm so glad I ran into this error. Oh my goodness. Can you tell why I ran into an error today? I'm gonna give us a second to brainstorm. Why did I run into this error? And you know what, I'm gonna do this. I've got my build failure. You're more than welcome to read my error message. And I think the key one here is, you know, it says unauthorized, could not transfer, yada, yada, yada. And I think the key here, I'm gonna be even more specific, is here. This is the exact line I read that helped me realize why I ran into an error. It requires a bit of context though. It requires a bit of context to really understand. Cool. We've got Joe saying, did you attach the policy to your EC2 instance? Yep, I think I did. So let me check. Okay, I've got my EC2 instance. And to Harsh, who's saying which one is the actual live stream, this is the actual live stream. I know you see 4 because the other 3 are some 24/7 live streams that we use as backups for people that might have missed the initial one. But Harsh, this is for reals. So thanks for joining. And we've got nextwork-devops-Natasha. Let's just see. Do I have a role attached? Ah, I do. So Jove, I think, great point. That's also the first thought I had, but that's not the real reason. I have a feeling this one's going to be a bit tricky to spot. Okay, so I will share the answer now. Okay, you got 3 seconds now, just kidding. So I will share the answer now. Notice my region. Okay, what is my region code? US West 2. Okay, US-West-2. And what is the region code here in this URL? US East 2. Okay, so we're looking for a CodeArtifact repository that doesn't exist because it's looking at the wrong region. So I made the mistake that I kind of warned you guys about, okay, except that I totally forgot that the settings.xml file doesn't just care about the name of your repository and the name of your domain. It definitely cares about the region that you're in. My goodness, look at this. So the correct code for me to connect would have been would have referenced US West 2, okay? Inside the code, it should have referenced US West 2, but my code says US East 2, which is the reason why I got the error. Okay, so I have a feeling if I were to just change everything that says east into west, I don't think my error is still going to be there. So let me try, say, replace east to west. Do you think that's going to solve it? Okay, let's see. I'm going to save the change to my settings.xml file, and I am going to try run it again. I'm going to try compile again. Do you think that's going to work now? Oh. Not yet. What's going on? Now US West 2, so this is correct, but we got a not authorized error. Cannot transfer artifact. Ooh. Let me see. I think we have resolved the error I thought we had, which was the fact that it was the wrong region. Was there anything else that changed? Should I just copy this whole thing and do it over again? Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm not gonna try to take too many shortcuts today, guys. I'm just gonna paste as it is. And erase it as it is. And paste my CodeArtifact auth token as it is. Okay, that seems correct to me. But was there an error in one of my commands? Let's see. Oh, I think the command I should run is this one. Ooh. Okay, and let's see if I can compile again now that I've exported the authorization token one more time. Did it just work? Wait, what? Did we just work? I think we just worked, team. Okay, turns out I think that the last time I ran the command for exporting an authorization token, it just, maybe I missed something, but it didn't work. But now I feel like this looks really promising, team. I think it just worked. So yay to us. A bit of a delay in our CodeArtifact setup, but I hope this gives you a bit of inspo that if you run into this error, what you could do is double check the region, double check the name of your repository, double check your account ID if you happen to be doing the project in a different account, and double check that authorization token. Oh, perfectly, we did it in 1 minute. That was awesome. This is satisfying. It's my first time seeing it exactly 1 minute. It's usually like 1 minute 3 seconds or 56 seconds, but this time it's completely 1 minute. Pretty sick. Okay, so we're gonna go back into CodeArtifact, and now let's just double check that we can actually see our packages inside here. Can we see them? Yes, we can. It sure worked. Very, very good. Is anyone stuck here? Is anyone still seeing errors when they run that command locally? If you are seeing any errors, I highly recommend you chuck it in the chat as soon as possible so that we can jump into it and talk about that error ASAP as well. But that's so good. CodeArtifact setup is all done. Isn't it crazy that we just did the first 3 projects of the series in less than 1 hour? We're now into project 4 of the series, which is CodeBuild, and let's set up CodeBuild one more time. All right, now CodeBuild has 5 key milestones because CodeBuild is a little bit more tricky, okay? That's totally fine. Let's challenge it together. And we're gonna start by launching an S3 bucket to store our build artifacts. Then we're going to set up something called a CodeBuild project. And then we're going to create some IAM roles to give CodeBuild the access to CodeArtifact. Just like our EC2 instance, CodeBuild doesn't have access to CodeArtifact by default. It's a little bit, CodeArtifact is just secure like that. And then we have to create a file called buildspec, which tells CodeBuild how to build our web app. Lastly, we will test our CodeBuild setup to just make sure that CodeBuild is actually working properly. Do you remember what CodeBuild's about? CodeBuild is a fully managed build services, so its purpose is to compile your code, run some tests, and produce a package, that WAR file, and store that file in the S3 bucket. So we're really in this era now of our architecture diagram, and the purpose of CodeBuild is really to compress all of this code you've written here, okay, compress them all, put it into one single file, and then later on CodeDeploy, which is the star of today's project, is going to use that file we throw inside the bucket. Okay. So Harsh, are you still getting that same error for running the settings.xml locally? Give us a bit more detail about what is the error you're seeing, as much as you can. I would like to support, and it would be really, really helpful to get a bit more detail. You got this, Sachin. All right, so let's start by just setting up our S3 bucket. And like you can see in the diagram, there's that S3 bucket that's responsible for storing the build artifacts. So we got to create that bucket, don't we? Let's go ahead and set that up now. So let's create a new bucket in S3, and let's name it network-devops-yourname. And in case you haven't checked, just double check that your region is still the same as everything else in your project so far. Don't set up your bucket in a separate region, put everything in the same place. So we've got our bucket name, and that's it. Let's create it, and we're done. Next up is to create that CodeBuild project. So we're going to open up CodeBuild. Let's visit CodeBuild over here. And I really like that all of our developer tools, so this code suite of tools, share a left-hand navigation panel that you can see here. You got source, your artifacts, your build. So we're now up to build with CodeBuild. And let's select our build projects tab. Okay, so we're going to open up CodeBuild now, and let's create the project. So let's select create project here, and let us name our build project something simple, nextwork-devops-CI/CD. And the settings is going to be very, very familiar. So let us select source, which is going to be GitHub. And your GitHub connection should already be set up. So in our previous project, we set up a GitHub connection, and we've kept that connection. So next up is we can just go straight into using a repository that's inside your GitHub account that you've connected it to. Okay, so let's select a repository. Oh, and it says, doesn't seem to show me any repositories. What's up? What's up? What's up? If this is the same for you, let's figure out what's going on. Public repository? Nah. Maybe I did delete the connection? That's a bit strange. I can't seem to find a repository here. Is it the same for you, team? I'm gonna disconnect and try to use my GitHub connection to see if I can find a repository now. Oh, there we go. Okay, that worked. So it seems like I just had to manage the credentials and disconnect and then connect again to see my repository. So once that's done, last time we ran into an error with webhooks. So this time, let's just untick webhooks. It's not really necessary. And we're gonna make sure that for our environment, we've got on-demand, managed image, EC2, container, and operating system says Amazon Linux, standard, the image is Corretto 8. All right, and again, this is project 4 of our 7-day DevOps challenge. So if these steps are a bit quick for you, just know that we do have a dedicated project just on what we're doing here. So I'd highly recommend checking out that demo, project 4. And then of course for build spec, we are using a build spec file, and that build spec seems to be causing a little bit of pain in the chat. So we'll make sure that we get to talk about the build spec errors that might come up. Okay, for your artifacts, S3, you know which bucket you're using. It's the one you just set up. It should be called nextwork-devops-CI/CD Natasha. Okay, and then when that's cool, you can enter a name for your artifact. So you can say build artifact as the name. We're honestly not fussed at all. It can be any name that you want. You can literally put your little, you can put like teacup, you can put like coffee. But literally all that does is it just names the file for you when it stores it in S3. So if you'd like to just have a little bit of fun, feel free to just name it something random. And you'll see that file pop up in your S3 bucket. Cool. Our artifacts should be packaged in a zip file. And the logs, we're going to use CloudWatch logs to help us with troubleshooting today. So the name for the group is already in here, as you can see. And I'm just checking the chat for a little second here. Okay, so for our CloudWatch group, we're just going to name that AWS /CodeBuild /network-devops-CICD. There we go. All right, so let's create that build project now. I think that should be all sweet. So after we've set up our build project, you're gonna see that we have an IAM role that gets created for CodeBuild. So that service role that gets created will pop up right inside this configuration panel here. You see this configuration panel, service roles right here. You can click on it and you get taken to IAM. And of course, this determines the permission settings for your CodeBuild project. If your CodeBuild project doesn't have access to CodeArtifact, CodeBuild is not going to have access to the repository, the CodeArtifact repository, and that's going to cause an error. So what we're going to want to do now is we're going to want to make sure that CodeBuild has the permission to your CodeArtifact repository. To do this, we actually get to reuse the same policy. So let's reuse the policy we already created in the previous step, which is called CodeArtifact next to consumer policy. We can select it and add those permissions. Okay, and now CodeBuild has access to CodeArtifact. That should set us up quite well to start our build and go ahead and see what happens. Okay. I have a feeling my build is going to fail, and I have a feeling this build is not going to work for the first one. Do you know why? My build might just fail in a second. And my gut feeling for why is because I have updated my settings.xml file. You know, that region thing that I talked about, US East 2 should be changed to US West 2, but I didn't push these changes to my GitHub repository. And if you remember how CodeBuild works by just grabbing the code that lives in GitHub. It doesn't care about the code that lives in your EC2 instance. If you update your code here, you must always push that code change into GitHub to see a change in CodeBuild. Otherwise, CodeBuild is still going to see the same old code that's stored in GitHub, and it's going to be like, oh, same error. You know, you didn't update your code. So this is just like a really important thing to note. It's another reason why GitHub is so important in this project, because CodeBuild is not connected to your local development instance. It doesn't actually know this instance exists. So all the code you write in this instance, it doesn't see, okay? I'm just making this very clear for us that if you change your code here, build spec and settings, you must push that code so that code is reflected in here. And my issue is that I have updated my settings.xml file here, okay? I've changed this from east to west, but I don't think I've actually updated any of my files. So settings.xml is still showing the false URL to west. And check your buildspec.yml file, and you're gonna see that I might just have the wrong, US East 2. Yeah, I might just have the wrong thing here as well. It should be US West 2 here as well. All right, so you're gonna need to just make these changes to your code, push that, and then see your code update, and then see your CodeBuild update afterwards. So because of that, if I want to check my CodeBuild project, it failed. Let's check the phase details and see what happened. Yep, it tells me I have an error while executing Maven settings.xml compile. Of course, it would run into an error here. It makes a lot of sense, to be honest, because it's the error that I'm having is related to my CodeArtifact connection. And CodeArtifact connection is what matters in settings.xml. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just make sure that build spec is corrected. Okay, it looks good. And right now it's not. Right now, my build spec file is still using that old region as well. So let's just update this to say US West 2. Save that change and make sure the settings.xml is also using US West 2 so it looks correct. All right, and now in my terminal, I'm going to save the changes that I've made and then push those changes to my GitHub repository. So I'm gonna save the changes by running git commit, update build spec and settings.xml. And then you can write git push like this, which is where you might run into this permissions error. And that permissions error was deadly. It got me really, really good yesterday. So it's totally okay that we're seeing it again. And let me just refresh this to see if there's been any changes. Okay, not yet. All right, so what we need to do now is just push those changes, and I'm seeing an error when I push my changes. To resolve those errors, you can unset these saved settings that might be inside your terminal, and just set the remote origin for your repository. Reset that origin again, because right now if I were to run git remote -v, it tells me that this is my origin, which means this is the repository that your code will get pushed to if you were to push the code. But what I need to do now is just reset any credentials that might be saved right now inside my EC2 instance, and then reset my remote so that it is now recognizing this other account that I want to be using. So let me check this now. Let me run git config global unset credential helper, and then let me also run the local version, which probably isn't going to make a big difference, to be honest, but it's usually ideal to just reset credentials both globally and locally. And then we're going to run this command that helps us with resetting the URL, so we're now using the account that you want to be using to access your GitHub repository. So the account I want to be using is netnextwork1. This is the account I want to access and pull the code from, or push my code to. And then we'll just make sure that we use git netnextwork1 at github.com/ and then again your username one more time, netnextwork1/ your repository. So this is where you can actually go here, and you're gonna notice that it's just the rest of this URL that we're using. So copy that, paste that here, and that should reset our URL. So now let's try to push. So git push, and it's gonna ask us for a password, which is where we can go and set up our personal access token to get access. So shall we get ready and get a personal access token? Whoa. Let's go into our settings, and let's head into our developer settings to create a new personal access token like this and generate one from scratch. All right. So I'm going to be creating a personal access token that says generated token for day 5 of the 7-day DevOps challenge. This will let me push changes to my Nextwork web project repo. All right, the expiration, let's keep it short to 7 days, and let's just make sure it only has access to repositories and not the rest of your account. So we're gonna generate the token now, and we're gonna copy that and use that as the password. So let's paste that here into that, and you should see your code changes get pushed just like that. So I think our error should be all resolved now. Shall we go have a check at our GitHub repository and see if it has my latest changes to build spec and settings? All right, we had a change 4 minutes ago. That's perfect. It sounds like we have those changes all sorted now. So if I were to check settings.xml, correct. US West 2 is the correct region now, so I have the correct link. And this looks like the correct settings for myself. Very, very good. Okay, very nice. Let me try to rebuild my project and see what happens this time. Great, so we've updated the IAM role, We've created buildspec.yml and I've updated it too. And now we have to put our CodeBuild setup to the test, which is what we're doing here. Now we also have a bunch of guidance right now, and this is the troubleshooting checklist that I'd like you to see. Sachin, who's saying, oh, there's no luck right now with your CodeArtifact code again, and ran the command to compile your code. So Sachin, can you please clarify? Are you seeing this error locally or only when you run your CodeBuild project? Because that means different things for us. Let us know where you're seeing this error. Is it when you run it in your terminal? Or is it when you are loading this CodeBuild, when you're doing a build here with CodeBuild? And Mario is done. You completed day 4. No way! That's awesome! Wow, Mario, you're ahead of me. I'm still completing day 4. And I need to get up to speed to you so we can do day 5 together. And I think we're on the same page now, Mario, because I've succeeded my build. Amazing. So we've succeeded the build, and it looks like everything is a success now because all of these settings were tick, 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 all done. Okay, so for everyone that is failing this right now, this is your chance. Like, please spend this time right now to put in the chat exactly where you're seeing your error. Is it locally? Is it when you see, when you try to build with CodeBuild? Can you double check your settings.xml file? If anything, send me the link. Send me the link right now to your GitHub repository so I can be in that GitHub repository, open up the file, and we can see it together. Okay, so I think it could be an error with one of your files. It could be an error with your CodeArtifact token. I think it's going to be hard for us to troubleshoot without seeing the code sometimes. So if you're feeling brave and up for it, send the link to your GitHub repository and we can open it live. I think that could be a fun way to troubleshoot together. Okay, and Sachin says you see this error locally on your terminal. And that tells us a lot, Sachin. So if you see this error locally on your terminal and you're just running maven compile-s, so if you're seeing that error there, that tells us that the error is nothing to do with CodeBuild yet. That error has everything to do with that CodeArtifact stage first. So if you are seeing this error, double check your settings.xml file first because the code has your repository name changed, has your CodeArtifact domain name changed, is everything genuinely copied and pasted from the latest version of your CodeArtifact repository connection settings. I have a lot of questions there. So what I'd recommend is for you to share what your settings.xml file looks like. Because if you were to open up your connection window and your connection instructions, you really need to make sure that all of this code is correct and it's matching up what you see in this window is exactly what you see in your code. And also please make sure that your settings.xml file, that you're adding 2 lines to that file yourself. You should be adding a parent settings tag and a closing settings tag that captures all of the code that's inside. This code is not provided by CodeArtifact. This code is something that you need to add yourself, okay? So then make sure you have that too before you keep on going. And make sure you just have a role. So if you were to check your EC2 instances role, does it have access to CodeArtifact as well? If you're still stuck, then paste that entire error message that you see inside the chat. Because the actual error message could be very, very detailed and tell you more about what you've gotten wrong there. Lastly, Sachin, just double check the naming of your file. This is something that I think happens more often than not. So sometimes someone is like super stuck on running the compiling of their settings.xml file, and turns out it's because the naming is wrong. Check the spelling right now. Is it exactly lowercase s, settings with an s at the end, and it's .xml? If there's any typo at all, your file is not going to run. Another reason why your file might not run is if your file is in the wrong repository. Watch this. If I put my settings file here, I'm going to move it to the wrong folder. I'm gonna move it to this folder. And right now it's in the wrong folder. As you can see, if I were to collapse this folder, I can't see my settings.xml file anymore. So what's gonna happen if I were to run settings.xml? nvn compile -s settings.xml. I'm gonna run that command one more time, and you can see that I have an error. Okay? And that's because my settings.xml file is in the wrong place. That's going to cause an error. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on your file from wherever it is and just drag it out. Just drag it out so that it's underneath, so that it's at the very bottom of the list. It should be at the very bottom of your file navigation. I don't want to see settings.xml sitting at the top or hanging somewhere in the middle. It should be at the very bottom, okay? Because it should be at the root of your repository. And let me demonstrate what it looks like if you have a typo. Let's say I just called it setting.xml. And this is the command that we run. nvn compile -s settings.xml. Again, we've got an error because we have a typo in the file itself. Okay, so make sure your file name is correct. Okay, so that was a brief run through of all the different ways you could troubleshoot and spot for errors if you were to run into an error there. All right, so I'm also just going to make sure that we add that to our project guide because I feel like some of the troubleshooting steps I ran through might not be in the guide for now. Very cool. So I'm wishing you all the best, Sachin, and let me know if that was helpful at all. If you're still stuck, like Jove mentioned, post the output of your error into the chat. I'm going to move ahead now so that we are in the steps for today's project. All right? So in today's project, we are going to be launching a deployment environment, and then we are going to be using CodeDeploy to deploy our web app. Pretty exciting stuff, team. So how this is going to work is we're going to use CloudFormation, which is a service that lets us deploy resources really quickly. Instead of manually clicking through the console to set up a new EC2 instance, we just have to deploy the certain file, or we have to run the certain file, and it's going to go ahead and create our EC2 instance and some of the network settings that it needs. It's going to be a huge time saver for us to use CloudFormation. So I'm really excited for you to get to know the service today. All right. So in this step, we will use CloudFormation to to launch resources for our deployment environment. These resources include our deployment instance, which is the EC2 instance, and networking resources like VPC and more. Okay, very good. So you might be wondering why we're even launching a deployment resource, and what's the point of doing another EC2 instance? We already have an EC2 instance. The reason for this is because we need to set up a development environment and a deployment environment. Right now, we have a development environment. That's the EC2 instance that we currently have. So this instance, nextwork-devops-natasha or nextwork-devops-yourname, is a development instance. You use it to write and edit the code for your web app, just like we have here. We've just been writing and editing the code related to our web app inside this instance. What's the difference with this new instance that we're launching? It needs to become a production environment, and it's very important for these two environments to live separately. The development instance is what you see as a developer to create new features, write new code, test new things, and then the production environment is what your users get and see. So the production environment runs the code that our users are using live. By having separate EC2 instances for one, the development environment, and then two, the production or the deployment environment, you are really just separating things that could affect each other. Imagine if a developer had to test all of their code live in production, which means that you don't even get to see the effects of your code until all your users also have it too. That wouldn't be very nice. You're going to want to be able to test your code locally and just make sure everything works okay before pushing it out to your users. So that separate environment is the reason why we are launching a new EC2 instance alongside some network settings, network resources. All right. To do this, we're going to head over to CloudFormation. So let's open up CloudFormation here. And then let's click open CloudFormation like this. And CloudFormation, if you're new to it, is an infrastructure as code tool. So what that means for us is that it lets you just launch resources with the help of a single file instead of launching resources by clicking and selecting all these different settings inside different setting pages. You know how when we set up CodeBuild, when we set up CodeArtifact, when we set up CodeDeploy later on, we're going to be clicking through a few settings pages. You know, we have to manually type, we have to click through things, we have to manually connect things. But a CloudFormation template, or CloudFormation in general, lets you write everything that you want to deploy and set up in one single piece of code. And then you hand it over to CloudFormation and you're like, hey chef, here's what I want. I want an instance, I want an S3 bucket, I want CodeBuild projects, I want these IAM roles. Can you create all of that in one go for me? And CloudFormation is going to take this, almost like this ticket for you. It's going to say, okay, I can go and create this. And it literally goes and creates all of the things that you write in your file. And it really speeds up the deployment of resources or the launching of your resources, because it's also a lot more efficient if you want to do this the next day and you want to try to redo your entire architecture again. Instead of like manually doing things as we have, imagine if you had a CloudFormation template that just in one click just deployed all of the resources that you need. Okay, so that was your introduction to CloudFormation, and let's just see it in action. To use it, we're going to create a stack like this and use new resources to create our stack. And a CloudFormation stack is a project folder that holds together the resources that you want to deploy. In our case, we're going to create a stack, and that stack is going to be deploying and managing all of these deployment or production environment resources that we want to launch. So we're going to click into choosing an existing template, and we're going to upload a template file here, and we're going to choose a file. Okay, here is where you can actually download a file that we have ready for you. So click here in this link, next to web app YAML. Click on that to download it, and once you've downloaded it, you can choose it in your downloads folder. Okay, and here it is, ready for us. So once you have this template ready, you can click next, and then you can enter a stack name. So we're now just going to name the stack Network CodeDeploy EC2 stack to remind ourselves that this stack is all about CodeDeploy and all of the EC2 instance and network settings that it needs. So next here, you can check for your IP address. So you can click here to check for your IP address. And for myself, I can see that it's 110.173.160.6. Okay, copy that. Oh, I don't think I copied it. Copy that, paste it here, and then enter /32 to give your CloudFormation template some information about your IP address. The reason why CloudFormation wants to know your IP address is, again, so it can help you with setting up your network settings. If there was anything important related to, okay, only allowing private traffic from your IP address, this has gotten you covered. Okay, so your template sometimes will want to know information like this to keep you secure if it ever needs to set up network settings. And we know for ourselves that this one definitely will be. And you'll get to see all of the network settings it creates too. All right, so once it's set up, you can scroll all the way down, you can select next. And when you're here on stack failure options, this is where you tell CloudFormation what should happen if one of those resources in the template can't get launched. Let's say you write a template and you're like, dear CloudFormation, I want 3 buckets. And for some reason, all 3 buckets have the same name. If that happens, then two of those buckets can't be launched. All of your buckets need to have unique names after all. So what's going to happen is CloudFormation's like, oh, at least one of your resources have failed. I can't create it. What should CloudFormation do if it fails? This is where you can actually tell CloudFormation its behavior. In our case, the most secure thing to select is to tell CloudFormation to just delete everything. Even the bucket that was created and was okay and didn't have the error, we're going to delete that anyway to keep things very, very clean. And then here, we're going to say, yep, delete all of the newly created resources that you were doing halfway before we ran into that error. So this just really makes sure that your account is clean of any resources, because imagine if CloudFormation's like, oh, sorry, I failed the deployment, or I failed to launch your template. So I've created like 42 items that are all across your account, and there's just like 5 I couldn't create. So sorry, but at least you have 42 that it's just like randomly scattered across your account. And it might not even be helpful, because you might actually need every single resource in your template to launch for anything to be useful and something that you want to keep. So in our case, we're just going to say, yep, delete everything if any part of this template fails to launch. And at the bottom, you can say CloudFormation is allowed to create IAM resources for you, and it might just do that. You know, in our case, it might just create an IAM role as a part of this template. Now, why are we creating an IAM role in this template too? So the reason why we're creating a role is because we're about to launch a production environment instance, so the instance that's supposed to deploy your app. Can you guess what other service that instance is going to need access to? There is a service that it needs access to, and it's S3. Okay, so we've always been talking about how your production environment instance or your deployment instance, it's going to grab the WAR file that CodeBuild leaves behind. That CodeBuild needs to grab that file and then deploy it. To grab the file, it's going to need access to S3, which is why we are going to be creating a role within this template that lets your instance access S3 buckets. Oh, done. So we have all of these settings that you can double check now. Just make sure it looks okay. You can check that template is ready. Good. There's a stack name that we've set up next to CodeDeploy EC2 stack. Is your parameter correct, and does it have your IP/32? Done. Then you've got some stack failure options. So rollback on failure should be activated. Delete newly created resources during a rollback. Yep, activated. And I've got Mario also asking about whether CloudFormation is like Terraform. Great question, and great shout, Maya, for mentioning you could try using Ask in the project guide to learn more. Yeah, so we can totally do that together now too. So if you want to check what is CloudFormation, you can ask, oh, is it similar to Terraform? So let me highlight everything here and ask our project. I can do that here. And we can ask our project, is CloudFormation similar to Terraform? Like this. Oh, very cool. So we've got an answer now, Mario. CloudFormation is a service provided by AWS. It allows you to define and manage your infrastructure as code. Terraform is similar, but it's open source and can be used to manage infrastructure across multiple cloud providers. That's absolutely right, including Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. Okay, so there are some key differences in terms of the cloud providers that they support and the language that you use, but at its core, they are pretty much the same service. You use it to deploy resources just by using code. The key difference though is that CloudFormation is more for AWS resources, and then Terraform supports multiple cloud providers. So great question there, Mario, and I hope you enjoyed that answer from our project. Very, very cool. All right, so where are we? Oh my goodness, we're at CloudFormation. And we were halfway through reviewing things. So let us now select submit. Okay, so we've got our review all done. And while we wait, by the way, I thought I'd check in with the team. Jove, how are you doing with your project? How are things going now? Are you stuck anywhere, or are you also deploying your CloudFormation template? Sachin, how is that error going? Are you still stuck? How is build spec treating you? How is settings.xml treating you? I'm thinking about you, man. I hope it's all good. Okay. And while we wait, we've got a few questions that we can answer here. Okay, to set up for CodeDeploy, we launched an EC2 instance and VPC because they will make up our production environment. We need to separate our development environment, where we're writing the code, with the production environment, where we're deploying the web app, so that the code that we're writing as developers don't get shown to users until we're ready to push them into production. All right. Very cool. All right, so which service did you use to deploy your EC2 instance and your VPC? Instead of launching these resources manually, what did we use? We used CloudFormation. When we need to delete these resources, when we need to delete these resources created by our CloudFormation template, we can simply delete the entire stack This will automatically delete all the resources that are inside that stack. So that is absolutely true. So as you might know, CloudFormation is all about being able to deploy multiple things at once. And because all these things are managed by the same CloudFormation stack, when you delete the stack, everything inside automatically gets deleted. No more needing to go into every single service individually and then saying, hey, delete, hey, delete, hey, delete. You just delete once, you delete your CloudFormation stack, and everything inside gets removed for you. So that's pretty cool. Now I noticed that we do have a rollback in progress for my stack. And that usually means that there's an error. I'm really glad I'm seeing this error with you all because it's very normal to run into errors. And all you gotta do, honestly, expand that cheeky error message and understand what's going on. So for myself, I have a VPC that's in create failed state because the maximum number of VPCs has been reached for my region. Aha! Did you know that? Did you know that there's actually a maximum number of allowed VPCs in a region for your account? So because I have too many VPCs in my account, I need to delete one of them so that I can make space for this CloudFormation stack. So this is my error. You probably won't see an error if you don't have, if you just use your default network settings in your region. But if you run into any errors, you can always share them with the community. You can always run them through the project and see whether or not you can resolve it. But yeah, for myself, I've got a VPC I probably need to delete. So let's see if I can delete it. All right. So I can see that I've got 5 VPCs already, and that's definitely the reason why I'm getting into an error, because the maximum number of VPCs in a region for each account is 5. You can only have 5 at most. You can't have more. I know, right? So for us, what I can do is I can delete my existing VPC directly in the console. But for me, I can see that some of this might be created as a part of another template. Is that true? Yeah, it is true. So if it was created as a part of another template, I would rather just delete that entire stack that I have, so that it's that VPC is deleted as a part of it. So I've got a delete in progress now for this other stack that I've run in the past. And yeah, hopefully that means our VPC is deleted and we have space for this next one that I wanna run. Okay. In the meantime though, we can actually go into our template here. And you can see that there was an attempt at launching these resources. Oh, we didn't get to we didn't get to see all of them, but there are actually multiple resources in this CloudFormation template. They're heaps actually. And the cool thing is, once this entire template is launched, all of these resources get created for us, and we don't need to worry about creating it from scratch ourselves. Now, I know it's on me that my VPC is not working. So to buy us a little bit more time, I thought what I could do is I could show everyone here what's inside that template that we launched. So this is the template that we sent to CloudFormation. When we uploaded that file, that template file, this was the file that we sent through. And it basically is a YAML file, so defined in the CloudFormation's favorite language, YAML. And it tells CloudFormation what are the resources we want to create. You can see we've got an internet gateway, we've got the VPC we want to create, and then there's also a VPC gateway attachment, public subnet, so many network resources also here. So we've got quite a few resources that gets created in this template. And you might be wondering why we're even deploying networking resources. It sounds like it's just the EC2 instance that's hosting our finished web app, so what's the point? We're also deploying networking resources because EC2 instances actually need to function in a secure and configurable infrastructure. And what I mean by that is web apps in particular have very, very specific settings on what they need access to and what kind of traffic they should allow and should not allow. So if you want to make sure that your EC2 instance can function correctly, you're going to want to make sure that you just deploy all of the networking settings that come with that instance and not rely on your default VPC. Because if you were to rely on your account's default networking settings, you're probably going to go wrong somewhere. There's probably going to be somewhere in those networking settings that doesn't actually work with a web app for an instance that's hosting a web app. So deploying all of the networking settings is kind of like this common practice that you have. If you were to deploy an EC2 instance, just deploy all of the networking settings that it comes with, or the networking resources that it might need if it has particular requirements. And that's the reason why we have all of these other network settings. We've got a VPC, we've got subnets, route tables, internet gateways, and security groups all in this template as well. I highly recommend checking out our VPC series of projects where you can actually learn more about all of these services in detail. But in the meantime, I'm just going to make sure that I can try to run the stack one more time and see if we can actually deploy this stack. Shall we give it a go? Okay, so let me create a new stack again. This time let me upload the template file, choose the template file, and let me try do this one more time in CloudFormation. So let me try adding the stack name. Enter your IP. Oh, that's a different IP address. I don't know if this is actually the correct IP address for me. So I'm gonna check another source. It's strange, sometimes the what's my IP the IP address it detects is like different to what my actual IP address is. I think sometimes it does that. Unless my IP address actually just changed mid-live, which is crazy. But yep, I can see here it's actually still the old one. So I'm gonna choose this one. Okay, let's hit next. And let's keep on going with setting up our template. Okay, let me try to launch this one more time. Oh. Oh, there's one more part of my IP address that I didn't copy over. All right, let's see if that works now. Okay, so let me just submit that one more time, and hopefully we can actually launch my CloudFormation stack to create all of my deployment resources. Mario, how are you doing? Did you get to launch the CloudFormation template? Okay, so we've learned about all of these networking resources that we're going to see soon. So we can actually just answer some of the questions about these resources while we wait. Seems like I'm still getting the same error. Shall I try deleting from here? I'm not sure if this is the best thing to do. I seem to be running that VPC error again because there are a few things that I need to delete. Is it gonna be okay? It seems like I have a few things I'm gonna need to delete for the VPC to delete as well. This is a bit troublesome, isn't it? Let's see if there are any other VPCs I can delete today. I'll see if I can just delete this one and then move on with my CloudFormation template. I'm a little nervous. I hope this is gonna work. But since I've deleted one already, I'm going to just try and launch my CloudFormation template so that it should be okay now. And yeah, really good to hear from you, Jove. Detach the interface. I know, right? I was thinking about doing that, but luckily we already have this one that I could delete from the other VPC I could delete, so I could save the time of detaching an interface and go straight into creating the stack again. But yeah, great suggestion there. Next up, CodeDeploy EC2 stack, and our IP address is the one from here. Did my IP address actually just change? Oh wow, IP addresses are shady, guys. It keeps changing around for me. I don't know if you saw that. But we gotta stay alert to our IP address and just make sure we're not using the wrong one. Oh dear. I think 110.173.160.6. /32, so that we are using our IP address and then make sure again that we are deleting all newly created resources. Woof, let's keep on going, team. And thanks so much for waiting for me. It sounds like I'm the one that has the error this time. And the stack needs to be deleted as well. Oh, okay, that's all good. As you can see, it's so common to run into errors in CloudFormation. I've honestly gotten so desensitized to like any errors you might run with this service because it can fail from literally anything within that template. And in our case, we're failing again and again. Like for my case, I'm failing again and again because of VPCs, but it could have been any other service as well. So let's keep on going. I'm not gonna give up. I have a plan. I've got a plan. And the plan is to run this stack now that I've deleted my resources. I wonder why I can't seem to copy. Oh, I can now. Okay, so I can copy, paste this here, and let me just launch my CloudFormation template one more time. Okay, so really, really great news that Mario has gotten it all sorted. Jove, let me know, is it all sorted for you too? I hope so. And yeah, Sachin says settings.xml stuck on me like glue. So like we've suggested there, Sachin, we really recommend that you share exactly what is the entire error message you're seeing in the terminal so we can help you out there. But yeah, sending you all the best as well. Okay, I think it's looking a bit more promising now. So you can see that I have a lot of resources getting created as a part of the stack. Great, this is what we want to see. So let's take a screenshot and let's answer this question while we wait. Other resources created in this template include networking resources like VPCs, internet gateways, I would say route tables, and subnets. They're also in this template because a production environment has specific requirements around traffic that it should enable and block out, setting up all of the networking resources that will help our EC2 instance work, that will help the deployment work is common practice. Okay, great. And let us take a screenshot now. I feel a lot more relieved now that the stack is working. And let us move along. Great. So now that it's done, you can even see that you've got events here that tell you exactly every single thing that gets created as you go along. So this events tab is also great for just seeing, oh, what's happening next, what's happening next. It's like creating this resource next, it's just finished with this one, and there's usually a status reason as well. So you just get a really good breakdown. Sorry. You get a really good breakdown of CloudFormation deploying all of these resources for you. Cool. So let's go ahead and prepare our deployment scripts. So now that our EC2 instance, we have this deployment instance that's out there, we want to just start deploying our application. And to do that, we need to prepare a set of scripts and configuration files for CodeDeploy. Just like how we have buildspec.yml for CodeBuild, we need to write the equivalent for CodeDeploy so that CodeDeploy knows how to deploy our application. So in this step, we're going to be writing a bunch of files that basically gives CodeDeploy the instructions of handling the deployment process. And then we're going to update another file inside our web app so that all of the deployment files are also so that all of the deployment stuff is going to get packaged up in the same deployment file that CodeBuild makes. It's a bit of a process, but we'll also understand it more as we go. In this step, we will set up deployment scripts that will help automate the process of deploying our web app. CodeDeploy will read these instructions and follow them line by line to figure out how it can help us deploy the web app onto the instance we just set up. Okay? Really, really fun to be starting the step now that I can definitely see that our crate is complete now for our deployment resources. So that's definitely all done and ready to go. And now we can head back to our handy little IDE. Okay, so in our IDE, we're going to create a new folder here at the root. And the folder is going to be called scripts. Like this. Okay, and scripts, if you're new to this term, are like mini programs that you run to automate code. Because usually when you want to run code, you have to run it line by line in the terminal. It's like we have to run install Maven, install Java, install Git. Okay, we had to run those codes line by line. But what if that code, all of those lines, can be run automatically for us? We just have to run the script, and all of the commands in those scripts get run for us. So that would be a lot of fun, and it's going to be very efficient. So in this step, let's create a script that helps us with grouping together all of our deployment commands into mini files inside this folder. Okay, so we've created our scripts folder, and inside we're going to create 3 files. These 3 files are going to set up how we automate deployment. So let us create that first file, and let's call it install dependencies. Can you guess what this script is going to do? Make a wild guess what the install dependency script is going to do. You're a genius if you guessed, oh, is it going to install dependencies for us? That's right. That's right. So part 1 of deploying an app is to make sure that the EC2 instance responsible for deploying the app has all of the packages and dependencies that it needs. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to automate the process of making sure that your EC2 instance has everything that it needs to deploy a web app. So those dependencies are called Tomcat, okay? And then there's also another one that we're installing called HTTPD. All right, so that's our first script, and just like that, we've created a script. So if you want to see that line-by-line breakdown of installed dependencies, here it is, and it's all about making sure that your EC2 instance has something called Tomcat, which is a Java application server. And what that helps us with doing is it helps us with making sure that Tomcat is in your EC2 instance so that it will be responsible for hosting the web app when you're ready to host it. There's also a bunch of other commands here that we can look into and learn about, but the important part here is that this command here is all about just making sure you have the correct dependencies inside that instance. Okay, and if you're new to the concept of web servers, it's true that an EC2 instance doesn't innately have the ability to just host a web app. There's usually a lot of things that come into play here, and that's the reason why you might need to actually install a tool like Tomcat to become like a web server inside your instance, and Tomcat becomes the actual server to host your web app. It gets a little bit deep there, Tomcat. So if you'd like to know more about Tomcat, you can always ask it and say, tell me more about Tomcat. But I would hate to distract us too much from the core of this project today. Oh, and we'll just have to try again later. I would hate to distract us from the core of our project. So I won't stay too long, just in case it distracts us from focusing on CodeDeploy, which is all about just making sure we can automate the deployment process today. So scripts are mini programs that helps us automate the writing of commands, the running of commands. To set up CodeDeploy, we also wrote scripts to automate deployment commands, i.e. these are the commands that our deployment EC2 instance needs to run in order to host our web app. Okay, so first up was install dependencies, which we just created. So install dependencies.sh will automate, I will say install dependencies will help our EC2 instance install all the dependencies it needs to host a web app like Tomcat, the web server. So notice that we have a little round circle at the top here. All you gotta do is press Ctrl S here to save your changes to install dependencies and move on to the next script. Our next script, let's create a new file. And our next script is gonna be called startserver.sh. Interesting. What do you think the start server script is gonna do? Are you a genius? Round 2? If you said, does it start a server? You're completely right. So this script is all about waking up Tomcat, which we installed in the previous script, so that it can start itself and start hosting a web app in the next script. So this script is truly just about, okay, let's just start the server. It also starts Apache. So I just realized I might have forgotten to mention Apache previously. So Tomcat and Apache do work hand in hand. We've got Tomcat, which is the Java application server to run a Java app, and an Apache, which is the web server to actually host the web app. I just realized I might have been mentioning Tomcat when I was meaning Apache, which is completely on me. And if we'd like to clarify it together, let us just ask again, can you clarify the difference between Tomcat and Apache? Okay, so you can always put something through ask if something is a little bit confusing for you. So Tomcat and Apache are both web servers. They do serve different purposes, correct? So Apache is the web server. It handles the actual traffic from people who want to visit your web app and your host EC2 instance. Whereas Tomcat is a Java application server that runs Java web apps. It actually makes sure that your web app can run. So like a web page can be created, and an Apache is like, oh, a web app is created. Let me handle the traffic coming in and out that wants to actually access this web app that we've started up. So Apache forwards requests over to Tomcat, and it gets a little bit into the networking area of Apache and Tomcat. It's a really, really good extra for experts to read. I highly recommend it. Okay, so here in Start Server, we actually have a cute command here called system.ctl, systemctl. And systemctl is a command for controlling services in Linux. So with systemctl, you basically say start or stop. So you can say start Tomcat, stop Tomcat, start HTTPD, stop HTTPD. But in our case, we're saying start and enable. So enable is basically saying that we can use it and we can run it. Starting it is just like waking it up. So it's a very, very simple script. But again, the fact that it exists means it's one less command for you to run in your terminal. So we love start server as well. So start server.sh is another script that's all about starting up the two servers that we've installed in our EC2 instance. One, I think that we're using in our EC2 instance. One, it starts up Tomcat, responsible for running our Java app. And two, it starts Apache, the web server responsible for handling web traffic and passing requests to Tomcat. Very cool. So now that that is done, we can select done, and let's keep on going. We've got our third script now. So 3 for 3, how are we going? I hope these scripts are going all good for you. So let us select a new file again and create our third script called stop server. What do you think stop server does, team? Are we 3 for 3 genius mode? So stop server for us is all about stopping Tomcat and stopping Apache when we no longer need them. So let's go here, perfect. So stop server is a script that basically checks, is Apache and Tomcat running? If they are, stop them. That's all the script does. You know, if it's active, stop it. So the reason why this is a great script to run is because it makes sure that your server is not going to disrupt anything if it continues to run when it doesn't need to. And the reason why we need to check is we also just need to make sure that our script isn't in the middle of serving someone before we decide to shut it down. We're only just trying to shut down like servers that we no longer need and are no longer active. So in this case, stop server will stop Apache and Tomcat when they no longer need to be serving someone. So stop server.sh is a script that stops our Apache and Tomcat servers when they're no longer needed to serve the web app to a user. Okay, so last thing after we've created all our scripts is to set up appspec. So appspec is a new file. I know, it's like the fourth file we're creating, but this is the reason why they're all separated into different scripts is gonna become very, very clear now. We're now gonna set up another file called appspec.yml. So please create a new file and make sure it's at the root, so it should be where build spec is around here. And that file should be called appspec.yml. No typos, so double check. Is everything spelled correctly? Appspec.yml. Make sure if you want to just close that folder, if all of these arrows were pointing to the right, can you still see your appspec file? You want to make sure your appspec file is at the root, okay? It shouldn't be inside any subfolders. Okay, and once it's ready, copy and paste that code for appspec.yml. Here you go. Pretty exciting, isn't it? So as you can see, we've got a pretty beefy kind of script here. But actually, what appspec.yml does is very, very clear. All it does is it gives CodeDeploy the instructions for how to deploy the web app. And that's the reason why it's also a YAML file. Just like how buildspec gives CodeBuild instructions, appspec gives CodeDeploy the instructions. Okay, so these instructions are saying, all right, CodeDeploy, we're deploying to a Linux operating system today, and your source, the source of the compressed file, is inside an S3 bucket, and the file is nextwork-webproject.war. So this is a war file that gets created. I'm suspicious of this. We might need to come back to this in a second. Because I have a feeling our war file is named something different. And if it's named something different, this might cause an error. So I've got my eye on this. I think our war file is titled something slightly different to this right now. Maybe not. It will cause an error. We'll see. Then we've got hooks. So hooks says they are some event triggers that run at specific points in the deployment. So before you install, it kind of says like before you install all of like the web app files that you need, just make sure you have the correct dependencies locally. So it says, can you just make sure that you install Tomcat, install Apache inside the EC2 instances environment? And then we have after install. Oh, I don't think it's here. Oh, I think it was supposed to be application start, which is my bad. So this should be application start. And application start says, once everything's ready, run this. And then we are starting our servers. And then application stop, once we're ready to stop our servers, run this. Cool. I realized that the explanation for this script will just need to update a little bit. It seems to be using some the outdated version's content, so that's my bad. Let me just make sure I update this right after the live. Okay, so notice that each hook specifies the specific location of that script. Can you see it says location, scripts/install dependencies? Where have you seen that? Scripts/install dependencies, script/start server, script/stop server. Okay, so as you can see here, appspec is really pointing to every single script that you've created and separating them into different stages or different phases. And that really helps us make sure that the commands are being run in the correct sequence, in the correct order. Okay, if you're curious, these are all called lifecycle events, and you're going to learn a bit more about lifecycle events in just a second. You're going to see that in the final step. Cool. Let's take a screenshot of our appspec file and also show off that we have some new scripts by opening them up on the left-hand navigation panel. So I'm just going to take a sweeping screenshot with all of these files in here. Upload that, and let's keep on going. Okay, so next up, we wrote an appspec.yml file. Then we wrote an appspec.yml file to give CodeDeploy the instructions for deploying our web app. The key sections in appspec.yml are, what are they? They are before install, i.e. use the install dependencies script to install dependencies like Tomcat. And then we've got application start, i.e. use the start server script and then we have application stop, which means to use the stop server script. I love it. I really love how organized a deployment process looks and how you can just separate things into specific labels: before install, application start, application stop, and just very clearly give instructions to CodeDeploy on how to do this. Yeah, I think this is awesome. Ooh. Whoa, okay, I think I might be at the wrong tab. Is this the right tab? Okay, there we are. All right. Cool, I'll just wait here for a few more seconds in case anyone has any questions. And cool beans. I'll just have like a little intermission here. If you have any questions or anything that you'd like to know more about, now's a great time for asking it. Cool. All right. I think we're all good then. So if we're all good, then I think it is time for us to move on to the next step. Oh, I just realized this has been shadily just in the background for us. Is this working? I think my setup might look a little strange today in the background. Madness? What's going on here, team? My setup does look a bit strange today, doesn't it? What's happened to it? Oh, I think I know what happened. One second, team. Let me just make sure I can get this. Okay, there we go. I think this is a bit clearer now. Great work, team. Okay, so before we submit everything, let's just make sure we have saved all of our files. Okay, so I have appspec, let's save it. We got start server, let's save it. We've got, I think, build spec next, so we need to save that too. So let's open up build spec and let's edit it so that our build spec file is now going to store all of the scripts and appspec as well that we create. I know this is a little bit like, whoa, what's going on here? So let me explain. So build spec is CodeBuild's instructions, and we now need to tell CodeBuild, hey, we just created new files. Can you please make sure these new files are also in the compressed file that you create every single time you build the project? I want to add that. Whoa. Like, you're just telling build spec, hey, can we please also make sure that appspec.yml and the scripts that I write is also in that compressed file that you generate? Because after you generate them, I want to make sure that they're in the file that CodeDeploy grabs and puts on the EC2 instance so that the EC2 instance can actually run all of the scripts that you've put in there. So build spec absolutely needs to include these files. Otherwise, CodeBuild and CodeDeploy is not going to work. They're not going to work. So let's save our changes to build spec. And let's reflect on that too. We also updated buildspec.yml to tell CodeBuild that it should also package up the new appspec.yml and set of scripts that we generated inside the build artifact, i.e. the compressed WAR file. Very cool. So once all of that is created as well, let us go ahead and commit and push our changes to GitHub. So let's open up a new terminal and let's run the commands to save and push our code. Let's go git add to stage our changes. Let's go commit to save that we have now added CodeDeploy files here. Okay, and once that's created, double check what's in here. Does it say that you've created appspec, script/install dependencies, Does it also say you have scripts/start server, script stop server? Like, we need to make sure all of these files, you've saved them. You press Control S so that when you save the changes in Git, the saved files get added to that commit. And now when you push your commit, oh, it seems to want my password one more time. Makes sense. So when you push your commit, you can push all of the new files that you've created today. Oops. Oh no, it seems like Git just wants another personal access token from me, and I'm like, oh, damn, I think I deleted the last one that I just used earlier. I didn't save that one, did I? That's my biggest weakness. My biggest weakness is that I never save my personal access token. I use it once, and the next time I get asked, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that exists anymore, guys. So I'm just gonna copy the exact same note, but we're literally just generating a token one more time because I didn't save the last one. Sorry. So let's just create this token. Oh. And let's just use this one as our password, and that should let us push the code through. Okay, great. So if you want to check your GitHub repository, you should see you have your appspec file here now. Very, very good. And your scripts should also be here now. That's excellent. That looks awesome. Very good job. So once all of that is done, you can now set up CodeDeploy. So we're almost ready. We're almost finished. CodeDeploy just has a few things it wants us to set up. And then once that's done, we're ready to see our live project. So in this step, we will configure CodeDeploy by creating a CodeDeploy application and deployment group. Okay, so that's going to be that's just going to be the names of like these things we're going to set up in CodeDeploy. I know the names application and deployment group is slightly new to us. So as a heads up, think of application as a folder within CodeDeploy, and the deployment group is like a way for us to save the settings for a certain deployment. To save the settings for how we like to deploy our app. Okay, very well done. So we're going to head over to our CodeDeploy console now, and we're going to select CodeDeploy, and we're going to select applications here in this menu. So we've got our applications here, and let's create a new application here. And it's very, very easy. Just call it nextwork-devops-cicd as the application name and EC2 as the compute platform, because of course it's an EC2 instance that we're deploying to, that EC2 instance that we set up with CloudFormation. Let's make sure we're telling CodeDeploy that, yeah, we've got an EC2 instance, and the name of this application doesn't really matter. It's almost like you're just titling a folder right now. And that's it. We've created the application. I really think of applications almost like this folder for an app that you want to deploy. And in this case, our applications is a folder that manages all of the deployments that we want to run for this web app. So in this case, we've got the folder, and next up is a deployment group. A deployment group is this smaller thing within an application. And this deployment group will store all the different ways you like to deploy your web app. Because imagine if you like to deploy your web app into different sets of EC2 instances. You can say this group of EC2 instances will deploy this web app this way. This other group of EC2 instances will deploy our web app in a different way. So a deployment group really helps you decide which EC2 instances you're going to deploy to, and also exactly how it gets deployed on that group of EC2 instances. I'm not going to spend too much on the definition of a deployment group. I think the key thing to know here is a deployment group is a group of EC2 instances that you can deploy to, and also the collection of settings that determine how you want to deploy your web app. A CodeDeploy application is simply a folder that holds together all the deployment groups for the same app. Okay, so let's create the deployment group straight away. And let's go ahead and enter the name of our deployment group, which is next-devops-cicd, familiar name, but this time we're just going to add -deployment group at the end. And our service role is, oh, I see I have a service role that I'm not supposed to have. The dramatic effect is that you're supposed to see that you don't have a service role to add here. I've used, damn it, I should have deleted that role before I started. It's like my fatal mistake every time. I just always forget to delete my resources. I shouldn't admit that out loud. I really should not have said that out loud. But it's true, I do have a weakness around always forgetting to delete my resources, which is why those delete steps always have to be very, very clear. I'm almost like writing to someone that I know that always forgets to delete their resources. All right, so we're back here. I just refreshed now. So I should be looking at the same thing as you are. Service role is empty. What is a service role? A service role is basically the crown that your CodeDeploy deployment group will wear. In this case, we don't have a service role. You actually need to set it up manually. So I know that for CodeBuild, you can set up the service role automatically, which is great. But for CodeDeploy, it's not that easy. You usually have to set up that service role manually first. Now, why does CodeDeploy need access to anything? Don't forget that CodeDeploy needs to talk to an EC2 instance so that it can say, hey, EC2 instance, can you host the app? You know, that's what CodeDeploy is really for. It's like a manager of this other groups of EC2 instances that are responsible for deploying the app. So in this case, our CodeDeploy deployment group is going to need to have access to EC2 instances. It probably doesn't have that by default. So that's the reason why we're going to head back into IAM and we're going to create a new role. So let's create the role. And let's say that this role is for CodeDeploy this time. Okay, so we're going to create the role for CodeDeploy. We're going to select next. And ta-da! There's actually already a permission policy that exists that AWS is managing for us. And that policy is basically a policy that gives a CodeDeploy deployment group access to EC2 instances and things that you might need to work with your deployment instance. So let's just use what's already out there. Don't need to go too far. Let's just use that and give our role a special name. Okay, that's all we need. Done. Create the role. Crown created. I know it's a lot simpler than the previous role we had to create for our EC2 instance. So I hope you think of that as a good thing too. All right, so my CodeDeploy role was created, and as you can see, I hit an error for some reason, but based on the creation date, this is definitely the CodeDeploy role I just set up, and it's set up perfectly fine. So that's good news for us. It means we can go back to our CodeDeploy setup, and if it doesn't load yet, even though you created the role, probably doesn't load yet. So what you're going to need to do is just copy the name of the deployment group, refresh your page, and just set up your deployment group one more time. Let's paste the name of the deployment group. Let's pick our service role. This time it should be visible. And let's finish up this configuration. Super, super simple, guys. I'm about to skip this. Okay, fine. I won't skip this. I get way too excited, and I just forget that there's so much. Sometimes I need to just slow down a little bit, and let's answer this question together. To set up a deployment group, you also need to create an IAM role to give CodeDeploy the permission to access the EC2 instances that it needs to coordinate. Otherwise, CodeDeploy doesn't have access to EC2, which equals not having access, not being able to give your instances the instructions for deploying the web app. Ooh, nah, not a vibe. So we definitely want to make sure we have the IAM service role set up. And once that's all set up and you've attached it, you can make sure that you choose a deployment type. We're just going to choose in place as deployment type, and it basically means that we're just going to deploy any changes instantly to all of our instances. Usually if you have like a big production kind of app going on, like this is something with hundreds of users, and you want to make sure a deployment is safe and slowly rolled across to your users instead of like affecting everyone, you would choose something like blue-green, where traffic will only get directed to the new environment that you create once that new environment is stable and can like handle everyone's traffic. The reason why in place is not really friendly for production, apps in production, is because in place can actually stop traffic sometime. You know, maybe your instance is like busy trying to run the new code and rerun some of the scripts that you've set up. And when it does that, it might not be able to serve traffic to your users. That's going to be a problem for big apps in production. It's not really a problem for us because we don't have that much traffic to manage in the first place. So we'll be okay with just sticking with in place. And then for our environment configuration, we're deploying to one EC2 instance, aren't we? So we're deploying to one instance, and now CodeDeploy is saying, no problem, deploy to an instance. Which instance do you want to deploy to? And we're gonna say, oh, yeah, here's the instance details. You can't actually just, you can't actually say the name of that instance is, for example, the name of that instance is this one. That's the name of the instance that I want to deploy to. But notice how we're using tags today. And the reason why specifically saying a name is not the most scalable way to identify your resources. Because what if all your instances have different names? How do you like catch all of them and automate this process? So a really, really great way is to use tags that your EC2 instances will share. So in this case, the EC2 instance that we've deployed with CloudFormation, it has a special tag called role web server, like this. So select the key role and select the value web server. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna find one unique matched instance. So a certain single instance in our entire account has a tag called web server. And let's open that up. I wonder which instance that will be. And as you might guess, the instance that it matches is the instance that we deployed earlier. Oh, there we go. The instance that matches is the instance we deployed earlier as a part of our CloudFormation template, which is great. It just means that by selecting a role called web server, you are now able to use the same tag and the same mechanism for all of the other web servers that you want to put in the same deployment group in the future. And what that means is, in the future, automatically tag an instance a certain tag, and it will automatically be a part of the deployment group, this one. You don't need to edit your deployment group settings and be like, oh, I've created a new instance. It's called this name. It has this ID. You don't need to do any of that anymore. Tags just automatically groups them for you. So I find that super, super helpful. Okay. So let's take a screenshot of our tag setup and let us put that in our documentation. Tags are helpful for identifying the instances that will be deploying the web app. We use the tag role equals web server to automatically match the EC2 instance we deployed with our CloudFormation template. Now in the future, when we have other EC2 instances, we want to also be in this deployment group. We can simply tag that instance, that new instance, with the same tag. They'll automatically get added to the same deployment group. A good time saver. Very cool. Okay, so I'm really glad to see that we can see that matching EC2 instance. So next up for us is that now that we have tags set up, we have I think just a few last settings to go through. This one is about CodeDeploy agents, and this is a great setting that just makes sure that there's a software inside the EC2 instance. So it's gonna install a bit of software into this instance, and that software is gonna be called CodeDeploy agent. And that CodeDeploy agent is responsible for actually receiving the instructions from CodeDeploy and running them on the instance. So a CodeDeploy agent is super important. It's kind of like this manager at the door of your instance that's always talking with CodeDeploy. So when CodeDeploy says, hey, to all the EC2 instances that are in this deployment group, can you go deploy the web app now, blah, 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 blah. It's the agent inside that instance that's going to be receiving that announcement in that setting and actually runs all of the instructions in the appspec file. Otherwise, your EC2 instance kind of just runs wild and lives independently. It might not actually follow the instructions from CodeDeploy. You need that agent to be inside that EC2 instance to communicate with CodeDeploy. So yeah, we're going to just make sure that we have a CodeDeploy agent set up. And let's take a screenshot of our settings. Okay. In order to connect, what are we connecting? In order to connect the deployment instance with CodeDeploy, a deployment agent is set up to receive instructions from CodeDeploy and make sure that the commands in appspec.yml are run. Cool. Okay, last two settings now. We've got deployment settings, and this one is all about how you want to deploy your application. Turns out there are lots of different ways you can deploy something, and I find it pretty wild. If you were to expand this, it's like, yo, you can go all at once, half at a time, or one at a time. So what that means is all at once is actually the riskiest way to deploy an app, but it's also the fastest way to deploy an app. You're literally saying every single instance is gonna deploy this app all together at once. And then half at once is like half of the instances in the deployment group is going to deploy this new change. And then if the deployed change works, okay, other half you can go. One at a time, extremely conservative now, extremely safe now. You're just making sure each instance, you're going one at a time. Okay, this instance deploy the change, this instance deploy the change, and you really would choose that option if it's important that no one's traffic and no one's app goes down. So we're just gonna do all at once because we have one instance only. It's okay if all of them get deployed the latest changes. And speed is honestly more important than caution here. Let's get to seeing our deployed web app right after this. Okay, so another key setting is the deployment configuration or the deployment setting, which affects how quickly and risky we're deploying the web app. We used CodeDeploy default all at once, so any changes that CodeDeploy deploys affects all the instances in the deployment group at once. This is the fastest way to deploy a change or a code update. Cool, all done. And then last setting for the day, we're just gonna deselect load balancer here. And load balancer is great. It's a great kind of like this traffic manager that just makes sure that if there's a lot of traffic coming into your web app, your load balancer is there to say, okay, let's divide up this traffic equally between all the servers in your deployment group, so not a single server is overwhelmed with traffic and goes down because it can't handle all the traffic. It will be a shame if you have like 5 instances and for some reason one instance is handling like 80% of the workload and then 20% of the workload is split across the other 4. You're gonna want a load balancer in the middle to say, all right, let's just like equalize the traffic so that each server is kind of handling the same amount of workload. So not a single one is like going down and then like disappointing your users because it's simply taking on more traffic than it needs to. We don't need a load balancer, which is why we're deselecting it. 1, I think it charges money, and 2, we only have 1 instance, so we don't really have different instances to balance traffic with. So let's deselect load balancer and create the deployment group, okay? And just like that, we've created the deployment group and we're ready to just see our live web app in the final step of today's project. Well done, everyone. So in this step, we will create a deployment to make our web app go live. I wonder how everyone in the chat is doing. I know that this is like a lot of new concepts coming through. So how are you finding this project so far? Please let me know. Is it a bit too fast? Is it a bit confusing? Would you like more like explanations? I'm really, really curious and your feedback will be so, so helpful and welcome. So thanks everyone for being here. Okay. So final step now, and here we're going to create a deployment. So we've got applications, which is like folders of deployment groups. And then you've got deployment groups. Okay, you've got applications, and you've got deployment groups, which is like, I would say deployment groups are like specific settings that you want to save. And then within deployment groups, you have deployments. So deployments is like a run of your application. Every single time you run, you roll out an update to your application, that's considered a new deployment. You're just deploying something again. So a deployment group is like a settings file. A deployment is like actually running something using that settings file. So that's the reason why there's like layers to these things in CodeDeploy. Applications, deployment group, and then the actual deployment itself. So what we're doing in this step is we actually need to create a deployment now. So to create a deployment, we're just going to select that handy little button. And where did that button go? Create deployments right here. I looked at the wrong place. And let's reflect on what we just talked about. So a CodeDeploy deployment is a specific update to our application that we are deploying to our users. The difference between a deployment and a deployment group is that the group is like a settings file, and the deployment itself is like a specific update that we make, that we roll out using that settings file. Okay, so let's click done. And the moment you create a deployment, this is the easiest part of the setup. It's almost as easy as creating the application. Check that you have the deployment group. Good. Check that you have the application stored in Amazon S3. That's us. So we're going to go into our S3 bucket. We're going to find our bucket. And our build artifact, we're going to copy its URI. And then we're going to paste it here. Oh. Hello. What is this? Copy that, please. Paste that here. There we go. So what we just did there was we're telling CodeDeploy exactly where is the build artifact that it needs to launch. The application isn't stored in GitHub because, again, CodeDeploy here is deploying our build artifact, that compressed file. So it's an S3. That's the location of the file. And let's go ahead and mention that the revision file type is a .zip file. I don't think we mentioned it very clearly, but we did say when we created CodeBuild that we are creating a zip file, so we're just going to mention that it's a .zip here. Okay? Okay, so now that that's done, let's mention what we've just learned. We had to configure a revision location, which means where our web apps WAR file, i.e. the compressed file ready to be deployed, where that lives. Our revision location is the S3 bucket that we've created and linked with CodeBuild, i.e. build artifacts automatically go into that bucket. So good, all done. And next, we'll just leave these additional deployment behavior settings. We'll leave those alone. But if you're a little expert and you want to know more, just know that these settings are more about doing something out of the usual. So sometimes you're like, hey, actually, I know my deployment group says this, but I want to do something special today and I want to override some of the settings. I want to change my configuration from all at once to one at a time, half at a time. I want to do something different. And that's when you would just set up a deployment group override. But we don't need to use any of these. We can just create the deployment and off we go. CodeDeploy kicks off a deployment of your web app. Yo, says Tim on AI Studio. How's it going? My friend, have you deployed your web app? Is that what you're seeing? I think it's crazy. I honestly was not feeling mentally prepared to run the deployment. I'm like, all right, let's just hope it works. But let's just deploy the web app when we're ready, and we've explained it. But the funny thing is, I totally forgot that the moment you create the deployment, off it goes to deploy right away. It doesn't really wait for you to be ready. It's like, all right, I'm gonna start now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's starting. So you can go down into your deployment lifecycle events to see what's happening behind the scenes. You can even click on view events. I actually want everyone to take a look here. There's a specific thing here that says view events, and you can see the specific deployment events and whether or not they're working. So you've got application stop, download bundle, before install, so on and so forth over here. And this is basically your EC2 instance trying to run all of these commands that you've set up in appspec. So if you remember, in appspec, what do we define? Can you have a look at it? In appspec, we said there are hooks for before install, application start, application stop. So we're going to want to make sure that before install, application start, application stop is working fine, okay? And you might notice it's kind of interesting here that we've got application stop as the first event before the other two. Can you guess why? It doesn't really make sense if it's your first time deploying an app, but it makes a lot of sense if you're deploying an update to existing EC2 instances. Because let's say your EC2 instances are already up and running and it's like going to just serve traffic as it does every single day. And now CodeDeploy says, we got an app update, everybody stop your tools, download this update, and then start your tools again and keep on going. So that's why the first event that should happen is application stop. You want to automatically tell all of your instances, stop your work, put down the tools, and just install this new app update before you serve traffic to users again. That's why it's the first event. I know that since it's our first time, even deploying this web app, it feels a little strange, but it makes a lot of sense that application stop is at the start. Okay. It's taking a bit of time, isn't it? Usually if it takes this long, I get a bit worried. I'm like, oh, is our deployment working? Is everything okay? Is choosing the right instance? Oh, I hope it is. I'm a little nervous now. I have a feeling it might fail, team. Because usually if it takes this long, I feel like it might just, it not work. Oh, wishing for a miracle. Surely. All right, so while we wait, your deployment might say a success, which is awesome news. But in other news, we can always have a look at what happens if your deployment fails. Okay, so if your deployment fails, you can always check what happens in the lifecycle events, and it's why I said, it's a good idea for us to click on view events and just view the events together, because it's a little bit intimidating to see errors, in CodeDeploy. Viewing the events here is going to help you a lot to troubleshoot where things have gone wrong. We also have a few things here that can help. So you have deployment error help posts, we've got issue accessing the start server file, we've got CodeDeploy agent was not able to receive the lifecycle event, all different kinds of errors that you might notice as you deploy this web app. So definitely check out those links, and they might just help you out. Oh my gosh, I'm nervous, guys. It's taking a bit of time. Should I refresh this? All right, it's in progress. Okay, I hope it's okay. It seems to be just chilling. And I'm gonna sneakily open up the address of my EC2 instance in the meantime, because this is the address that you can visit to double check that your instance has deployed the web app and it's working. We'll see. Oh wow. Okay. So we have a failure here, which is totally okay. It's totally normal to get a failure. And it seems like our failure is at the before install line. Oh, okay. So we've got an unknown error today. Strange. What's going on? feel like it's connected to the correct instance. But we've got a failure at the before install line. CodeDeploy agent was not able to receive the lifecycle event. Check the CodeDeploy agent logs on your host and make sure the agent is running and can connect to the CodeDeploy server. Okay, let me double check what's going on here. It says it happened in the before install line. So everything seems okay so far in my before install line. I wonder if there was an error here. What do you think, team? I have a feeling that there's one thing we forgot to do. Oh, I think I know what happened. I think I know what happened. I'm trying to think whether or not it's because we're supposed to rebuild our web app. Does that make sense? Thinking to myself. I have a feeling we're supposed to start our build again because we've built our web app before. Oh yeah. I just realized I don't think we did this. I'm trying to remind myself, have we done this? Have we done this? No, we didn't. So think about the timeline of things. We built the web app. We compressed it and created this file. We stored this file in S3. And then we went to create new files. We created all these cool new files, appspec and all this script. And then we said, okay, let's push them to GitHub. And ever since we pushed it to GitHub, I don't think we rebuilt our project. So the problem there is, because we haven't rebuilt our project since then, what's stored in the S3 bucket is still the old version of our code. It's still the compressed version of the old version of our code, which is a little bit tricky there. Because now CodeDeploy is like, okay, let me go and grab your latest build artifact, and it grabs the old version of our code. The version of the code without appspec, the version of the code without any of our scripts. And you can even see that the modified time, it's like only 1 hour and 30 minutes into the live, which means it definitely was not the version that we've created, that should have been created ever since we updated our source code. So what we need to do is we need to rebuild our web app, rebuild it so that the file that's inside S3 is an updated file. And then we try to deploy with that updated file so that CodeDeploy can actually have all of the files that it needs to run the deployment. What do we think? I feel like that could be it. So I've just rebuilt the web app now that we have the new files inside. If I were to refresh this, I should see an updated time. There we go. We've got an updated time now that now reflects the latest time that we built our web app. So now that it's built, we should be able to go back to CodeDeploy and say, hey, I think you failed because you were deploying with the old version of my code. You were deploying with the old version of our code. The build artifact at that time didn't have any of these deployment artifacts, none of the scripts, not appspec. So I just clicked on that failed deployment and I clicked retry deployment, but that's not the only way you can get there. You can always go to your application, click into the application, click into the deployment group like this, and then go back into your deployment group here. Oh, I think you might actually need to go here into deployments. Oh, and it succeeded. I think we just resolved the error there by rebuilding our web app. So that's awesome. And I'll just make sure that's a part of the step-by-step project guide. I'm surprised I completely missed that while writing the guide. And thank you so much to everyone for your patience there. Awesome work, everyone. So now that we've succeeded, there's only one thing left to do, and that is to visit our instance and see our live web app. So let's click on our instance. Let's click on that public IPv4 DNS. So that's the public address of our instance once we selected it. And let's try to run that in a new tab. So I have it open here like this. And my personal tip is to use HTTP traffic as much as you can. I feel like sometimes it doesn't work with HTTPS traffic because the security group might not actually allow HTTPS traffic. So what you want to do is you want to just put in, oh, it actually worked. So I take back what I said. Maybe HTTPS does work. And I made an assumption. But amazing, everyone. So as you can see here, my web app is now working. I'll even add a link to the chat to everyone that's tuning in live so you can open up the link yourself and you can also get access to my web app. Congratulations, everyone. That is the main part of our project done today because you successfully deployed your web app with CodeDeploy. Isn't that amazing? It's deployed the web app based on the build artifact that you created with the previous step, CodeBuild. So just like that, you can really get reminded of why you need every single step, every single time you do a new project in that series. You do want to make sure that all these different parts of your CI/CD pipeline are connected together. So I really appreciate everyone's patience with redoing things from the first step every single time we do a new project. It really goes a long way, doesn't it? And now we see our web app. So let's take a screenshot and let's celebrate in our documentation. So let's put that in here. And we're going to say that to check that the deployment was a success, we visited the IPv4 DNS address of our EC2 instance. We saw a live web app that's working and serving our web app code to end users, which is awesome. Congratulations, everyone. You've successfully automated a web app's deployment to EC2 with AWS CodeDeploy today. So awesome work. And if you'd like to challenge yourself a bit further today, we have a secret mission that can let you run disaster recovery. So the full power of CodeDeploy is the fact that you can go beyond just automating a deployment. Your secret mission is to actually conduct a rollback, which is a really, really critical skill for any DevOps engineer in real-world scenarios. What happens when a deployment is broken and it contains bad code that somehow passed the testing phase and is now into our users' hands? That code needs to be rolled back as soon as possible. So we're going to change our web app to make it look like it has broken code. We're going to watch the deployment fail, and then you will actually perform a rollback to restore the code back to what it was before so that your users get to see a working code again ASAP. So that's a secret mission that I'd love to invite you to give a go. It's hidden behind our secret mission here. So if you're pro, I highly recommend that you jump in. In the meantime, for everyone here, let us delete our resources. And for everyone that's thinking, wait, is it true we have a secret mission in here? I had that question yesterday, and it's true. All the steps for that is right here for our disaster recovery. So it's like a 5 to 10 minute task for everyone that's keen to do it. And I highly recommend checking that out in our project guide. Okay, everyone, I'm excited to be deleting the resources and finishing up the project. You're amazing, Sachin. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm actually sending you all the love and power for resolving that settings.xml error. And the best teacher, Natasha. You're so sweet, Tentimo AI Studio. Thank you so much. And Sachin, let's stay in touch in the community. I love to support And I think as we resolve your errors, you're going to help out a lot of other people along the way who might be seeing the same thing. So I'm really glad you're mentioning the errors that you're seeing. Let's talk about it in the community. I would say I need to be troubleshooted now mentally. Mate, I get that feeling. I get that feeling. And you're staying strong, so something to be extremely proud of. Mario says, you're the best. That's what I think about you. No, Mario, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. And how did it go with your project? Did you get to deploy it? I hope so. I'm sending you all the good vibes for a successful deployment. And if it's successful, send me the link. Send me the link to your EC2 instance's IPv4 DNS address. And before you delete the EC2 instance, maybe I can open it. Yeah, no worries. Delete the instance in the next minute if you're like, oh my god, I need to wrap up this project as well. Same. So again, I wonder if anyone else can actually open this link and see it working. So this is the link again in the chat, so you can see it before I delete everything. But let me go ahead and delete my CodeDeploy application, my CodeBuild project, and all of these resources here. We've got the step-by-step instructions for all of these resources in the tabs below. But if you like to challenge yourself, let's try to delete things without a lot of guidance, because deleting resources is something we should know just off of instinct and off by heart sometimes. Not every time we do a project, the delete instructions will be available. So it's good to train yourself on understanding, oh, what do I think I need to delete for this project? So in fact, what I'm going to do is challenge you. Let's not even look at the checklist. Don't even look at the checklist. Pause this video. Just delete as many resources as you can possibly think of, and then check the checklist and say, did I delete everything I needed to delete? I'm going to do that challenge now. I'm going to try delete everything without any guidance or a checklist, and let's see how far I can get. So I've deleted the application. I'm going to delete my CodeBuild project. So let's delete that. And for CodeArtifact, let's delete our repositories. And the domain, let's delete that too. All right, I think that's our code stuff sorted. If I were to do a bonus one, I would delete the connection. Should I just delete the connection? Should I do it? I don't want to. Should I delete the connection, team? It's actually a really, really good one to keep, because the ARN is probably gonna look so different next time. And I'm like a little worried that I'll run into that ARN error that I did last time. But actually that's all the more reason why I should delete, so that we can resolve that error together if I run into it for the next project. So goodbye to my connection. I shall see you next time. Okay, so for our for the deployment instance, do not delete it directly. Do not do this. Don't do this for their deployment instance. Don't forget, how did you create it? With the CloudFormation stack. How should you delete it? With your CloudFormation stack. So let's return all these resources back by deleting the stack entirely, and that deletes all of the resources in this list for us. So everything that we deployed with that stack gets deleted together. So good. And with that, that gives us the time to just delete something else. So I'm just gonna randomly pick my S3 bucket and just delete this one. How are you guys going? Are you guys also deleting everything without guidance today? I think it's a nice challenge to have. It's a good reminder to be like, oh my gosh, what do I have? Okay, so I'm just gonna delete this too. Okay, so bucket deleted. And our other EC2 instance also needs to be deleted. So let me go ahead and delete that. So that is next with DevOps Natasha. And terminate that. Don't need it anymore. Something else I don't need anymore is the key pair related to that instance. So let me just delete that key pair. And let us also delete what we don't need. So that template file, no need. And since we deleted the key pair, we definitely don't need that. We definitely don't need that private key anymore, the one that we stored locally in our desktop. So we can go ahead and delete this entire folder now. DevOps, bye-bye. See you in the next project because we're going to create you one more time. And then what else? What do you think? I think something else we'll need to delete. IAM? Is that a good shout, team? I would say IAM. So let's go into CodeDeploy role and let's delete this. We don't need this anymore. And what else do we not need anymore? I think a fun way to filter it is by going code, because all of these are probably code tools that we created, code service related tools that we created. So we don't need these roles anymore. They were created for other things. And it says the role with the name cannot be found, and that could be because it was deleted with the CloudFormation template. So that's totally okay. There was also EC2, the EC2 service role. So let's delete that. We don't need that. And then our policies. We've also created policies today, didn't we? So that one that we created was also a code-related policy, and we wrote it ourselves, so it's a custom managed one. And as you can see, there's so many policies here created for CodeArtifact, and also for CodeBuild that we don't need. So you can delete all of these. I'll just demonstrate how you can delete one so that you can delete the rest. So there's also a CloudWatch logs policy. Very good to know. So this CloudWatch logs policy we don't need anymore. So let's delete that. It was created when we created our CodeBuild. And also its base policy we don't need. Oh my gosh, I feel like deleting resources is like its own project. Look at all these resources we need to delete. My goodness, guys. Okay, very nice. We'll also delete this one, which is like CodeBuild's access to code connections. And now that we've deleted the connection, we definitely can delete that policy. Whew. Is there anything I've missed, team? I think that's it, guys, for IAM. So now that it's done, let us delete our next thing. We've got instances deleted. Let's check our CloudFormation template. Is it all deleted? If I reload this, it should be gone. Unless it's cached. But if I've deleted my deployment instance, I don't think that link should work anymore because that instance is literally like, it's gone. So I don't think that link would work anymore. We'll see. And then for our stack, you can see that the delete is like completed, which is great. All right. And I would say for GitHub, we can delete that personal access token we set up. So let's delete that too. So let's delete the token. Gone, gone, gone. And you can see this is like struggling to load right now. So I think it's not gonna work if you wait long enough. But yeah, interesting. I think that I've given that a good go. CodeArtifact. Is there anything else I've missed? Let's check. CodeBuild, CodeDeploy. Yep, deleted that. What else? CodeBuild, deleted that. CodeArtifact, CloudFormation, EC2 instance and keep here, IAM. Oh, and there was another S3 bucket. I didn't delete everything. I'm a little mad at myself. I did forget this after all. So CloudFormation, when you launch a template, CloudFormation actually spins up a new S3 bucket in the background to store that template for you. So in our case, we can just go ahead and find that template. I can see that this one was created today, which is the reason why I can select this, CloudFormation, CF, CloudFormation template. So we can empty this and then delete the bucket because we don't need to keep that template, you know? And CloudFormation is a little sneaky for just creating a bucket for us, but I can see why it really helps with just storing your template somewhere safe. So I can't be mad. But you don't need it, so you can delete it. Okay, so let's delete that. And we have deleted everything. Wow, amazing team. Thank you so much for doing this project with me today. We'll do a final reflection, create a documentation, and off we go. So, services we used include CodeDeploy, CodeBuild, CodeArtifact, wow, IAM, EC2, CloudFormation, EC2, S3, Code Connection. Yo, look at you go. What else do we use? We use VS Code and GitHub. Man, look at all these resources that you use today. Key concepts we learned to include deployment, deployment groups, deployment scripts, appspec, and the importance of rebuilding your project before you deploy. This project took us approximately 3 hours, including troubleshooting and demo time. The most challenging part was probably really understanding the separation of the deployment instance from the development instance. Fuzzy that all these deployment commands are run there, but we don't ever see it. You know, we don't actually see it run the commands. We kind of just like get the updates from CodeDeploy. But it's actually buzzy to me that like a whole other EC2 instance was created in today's project, and it's running all these different scripts and commands, and we never really ran those commands ourselves. You know, so it's like a bit buzzy to know like this was happening somewhere else, and we weren't manually doing it. Like that's like a personal thing for me. I wonder what is the biggest challenge you saw. It was most rewarding to see the deployed web app. Can you blame me for choosing that? Iconic moment, guys. The web app actually showing and like displaying your web app, displaying your work. And yeah, I opened the web app page and it's gone. Perfect. That means our EC2 instance is definitely deleted now. So why did we do this project today? We did this project today to learn more about how deployments work and how to do it ourselves. We also learned how CodeDeploy is linked with other services in this CI/CD pipeline so far. In other words, CodeBuild, especially GitHub, EC2, heaps. This project definitely met our goals. And we got new learnings again. All right, next up, when are you gonna do the next project? I know I'm doing the next project tomorrow. So I hope I'll see you there. And if you're tuning in after, we first went live today, just know that you are so welcome. Oh wait, where's the devil emoji? Yeah, that's me. So I'll be working on the next project tomorrow, and this is actually part 5 of the series. Okay, so this is part 5 of a series of DevOps projects. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, and I hope you've had all the fun. You've learned how to launch a deployment architecture, so the EC2 instance and the network settings with CloudFormation. You learned how to prepare these deployment scripts, and you also configured CodeDeploy so that you can successfully deploy your web app into the world. That was amazing. I had a lot of fun, and let's select Mission Accomplished to see our final project. I'm excited. I love seeing documentation. Yeah. Give it to me. I wonder what our documentation is gonna look like the layout and the LinkedIn post. It's gonna look amazing, I think. Wow. Here's how you can automate the deployment of your Java web app using CodeDeploy. And we did this in a project where we launched an EC2 instance, we wrote some bash scripts, we created an appspec file, created a CodeDeploy application. Whew, you did that. You really did that. Save your project as a PDF. I'm gonna save my documentation like this. And to set up your LinkedIn post for attaching a PDF, you can close that preview, open up the More button, add a document like this, and then you can select Choose File and choose the PDF that you just downloaded. Okay, and while that's loading up, let me just show it to you in a new tab. All right, hey, look at this documentation showing off your deployed web app from the front page. And you can see that this is your project introduction, launching a deployment environment. Ooh, amazing. Deployment scripts, very cool. You also created appspec, very nice. Setting up CodeDeploy. This is a good page. It talks about a deployment group, to set up a deployment group, the tags you had to set up. Yeah, this is a good one. And also the other key setting using agents, very nice. And the final success, amazing. And if you were to do the secret mission, yes, you get another page of documentation unlocked. So good. So I can see my posts in here now, and you can always add it to your next week portfolio too. I like to add it to my next week portfolio. I'm gonna keep all my projects in the portfolio for this series in the dark theme. I quite like the dark theme, guys. And you can add a title. Done. Oh, done. So good. Okay, let me open this up in my portfolio. And you should see that you can deploy a web app with CodeDeploy. That looks good. That looks really good. I'm kind of hyped looking at this. I'm like, yeah, this looks pretty fun. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And let's just keep building our portfolio team. So many projects we could be doing together. So much opportunity. I'm excited for all of us. And if you'd like to see my portfolio, I'll just add that link to the chat as well, so you can check out all of these projects in my portfolio. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining me today. This was so much fun. I know it was a challenge. I know it was a step up, and you did it. You did that. Be proud of yourself, and I'll see you tomorrow in the next project of our CI/CD pipeline series. You got this. Bye, everyone.